Okay, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the 2021 APAC Hydrogen Forum, Connecting Green Hydrogen, hosted by Leader Associates. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, the traditional customs of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And thanks to everyone for traveling near and far. Thank you for all your efforts in getting to attend this event. My name is Lin, and as a friend of Leader Associates, I would like to congratulate them on the successful opening of this conference today. Leader Associates, as a global leading renewable energy event organizer, is committed to clean energy and stands at the forefront of environmental sustainability. They put faith in their work to make the renewable energy available and affordable through practical business platforms and non-business programs. It has been challenging to organize the event since last year, together with the team in Australia. They have worked tirelessly to ensure the conference run COVID safe. This includes compiling with all state rules and regulations regarding to COVID and adopted the official recommendations. And thanks to the team to bring up this opportunity, I'm sure we're excited and appreciated to see each other in person or over the video conference. May I also express our sincere thanks to all the distinguished guests, sponsors, speakers, and a special welcome to the Victorian State Energy Minister, the Honorable Lily D'Ambrosio. Now, in the APAC Connecting Green Hydrogen, it brings together the leading representatives from the hydrogen industry and more than 600 participants, 80 speakers, 50 exhibitors, and sponsors across APAC. And trends of the emerging APAC hydrogen industry and covering Australia, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. Now, once again, on behalf of Leader Associates, thank you for joining us this morning, and I hope you enjoy the sessions we have installed for you today. Now, I would like to hand over to the chair of today's session, Mr. Peter Valdenville. He is a senior new business manager from the S&P Global. Welcome, and over to you now. Thank you.
I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay my respects to their elders, past, future, and present. I would like to extend my respects to all Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islands peoples here today. Welcome. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, in this room and online. I am Peter van der Veld from S&P Global, and I'm delighted to be your host for this first day of the Connecting Green Hydrogen APAC 2021 conference. It's my pleasure to be leading you through today's conference, introduce the speakers and panel moderators who have come from all over the country to share their expertise and enhance our knowledge. The theme of this conference is hydrogen, green hydrogen. We have experts from diverse backgrounds who will be adding some color to the debates. And who knows, by the end of the three-day conference, we might see in all colors of the hydrogen rainbow. Hydrogen is not new for Victoria. From 1850 to the late 60s, tongue gas was produced and supplied by dozens of small gasworks who converted coal into gas. This tongue gas, or coal gas, as it was called, is about 50% hydrogen content. But it wasn't green, that's for sure. Now with us today, are 2 government ministers and over 30 experts in 5 keynote speeches and 5 panel discussions. Speakers and panel members from across a number of different backgrounds, such as engineering firms, law firms, government agencies, insurance companies, pipeline companies, research organizations, banking and financial services, and many others. I personally look forward to hearing from today's experts on their views and the opportunities that they see in this industry. I wish everyone a successful, safe, and productive conference. Thank you. Now, it is time to welcome onto the stage our first keynote speaker, the Honorable Lily D'Ambrosio, Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, and Minister for Solar Homes for the Victorian Government. Minister D'Ambrosio is a member of the Australian Labour Party and has represented the electorate of APAC in the Victorian Legislative Assembly since 2002. In 2016, she became Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change and Minister for Suburban Development. And on the return of the Andrews Labour government, she was appointed Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change and Minister for Solar Homes. Minister D'Ambrosio is a leader in action on climate change, renewable energy and energy efficiency in Australia. She oversaw the passage of the Climate Change Act, Victoria's landmark climate legislation, which saw it become the first Australian state to legislate in line with the Paris Agreement for net zero emissions by 2050. The minister has also overseen an overhaul of the Environmental Protection Act 1970, refocusing the regulatory body to focus on the prevention of harm to human and environmental health. Minister D'Ambrosio is a leading advocate for a modernized Australian energy system that facilitates a smooth transition into a clean, reliable, and affordable energy future. Please welcome the minister on the stage. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much, Peter, for your welcome. I'm very, very pleased to be here for the Connecting Green Hydrogen APAC conference. And I would like to begin by my acknowledgement of the traditional owners of this land, and they are the people of the Wurundjeri. And my respects go to all of their elders, both past and present, but also emerging, and any who may be here amongst us today. To all of you as guests, I'm absolutely delighted to be able to share with you our government's vision for green hydrogen. Firstly, a clean, modern, renewable energy system is at the heart of Victoria's net zero emissions future. And green hydrogen, renewable hydrogen, will make a major contribution to realising this future. And today I want to talk about the huge opportunities that exist for Victoria in the hydrogen space, our existing competitive advantages, and the work we are doing to become an international renewable hydrogen powerhouse. Over the last 7 years, Victoria has established itself as a leader nationally and around the world in the development of clean energy. We've made a very, very rapid transformation already. From a state that had just around 10% of our power coming from renewable sources, we are now producing around 30 to 33% renewable energy, renewable electricity for our consumption. And this is very much large part due to the depth and maturity of our renewable energy and our climate change policies. Through our Climate Change Act that we legislated in 2017, we've made it our goal to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. But importantly, it's also the signals that we send between now and 2050 that will help to drive the investment and the decrease in emissions that the globe needs. Earlier this year, I was very pleased to have announced a climate change strategy, and that includes our target to halve Victoria's emissions by 2030. The success of our approach has made us the leading state for renewable energy jobs, with 30% of the nation's renewable energy jobs here in Victoria. Our population is 25%. We have 30% of the renewable energy jobs. It's also made our state into a global destination for clean energy investment and Australia's leading jurisdiction on climate action. Victoria is now intent on solving the next big emissions challenge in the energy sector, and that is, what do we do about natural gas? Firstly, it's important to explain, well, why is it important for Victoria in particular? So here's some of the facts about our state and our reliance on gas, which are very much rooted in historical gas supplies and our colder winters. Victoria's share of the Australian population, as I said earlier, is about 25%, yet our domestic gas consumption is 37% of the East Coast gas market. There are 2.2 million customers connected to gas here in Victoria. 61% of Victoria's gas use is residential and commercial. Space heating is the leading use of natural gas in Victoria at 60.5%. And due to Victoria's colder winters, winter peak demand is 3 times higher than in summer, that is for gas. The second highest gas use is industry for manufacturing process heating at 30%. The gas sector accounts for 15.8% of Victoria's total emissions. Now, I know there's a lot of statistics and a lot of percentages, but you'll be able to see all of that on in our gas substitution roadmap discussion paper that is online. My objective is for our state to land the critical pathways we need to reduce emissions in the gas sector with a clear eye on what we need to achieve by 2030. So from the statistics that and the facts that I've just explained, it is a challenge for us, absolutely. But it's a challenge that will be met by great ambition and an eye to opportunity from our government. Importantly, as we have done with decarbonising the electricity sector, my intent is to deliver economic growth and investment, good jobs and great affordability for all Victorians as we carefully lay down the policies along those critical pathways. The pathways are improving energy efficiency, greater electrification, substituting natural gas with renewable hydrogen and renewable methane and biogas, and lastly, tackling fugitive emissions. We are the only state to do this important work, and we stand to reap significant benefits as a result. After all, what better way to incentivise a green hydrogen sector than to actually have a ready-made usage for it? And we certainly have that here in Victoria. So I'm very excited by this next major plank in our decarbonisation agenda, and I will have more to say on our plans in the coming months. To guide the state's green hydrogen industry, we've released our Renewable Hydrogen Industry Development Plan. The plan outlines the Victorian Government's focus areas and key actions that we will take to drive the development of a renewable hydrogen industry across the state. Through actions in the plan, we will capitalise on our vast renewable energy resources. We will create long-term jobs through new career pathways and skills clusters. We will take our renewable energy to the rest of the world, drive innovation. We will build our skills and capacity in renewable hydrogen, and we will assist in decarbonising our gas, freight, transport and industrial sectors. We are also providing funding to help complement our industry development plan. This includes our Energy Innovation Initiative, that's a $108 million fund, which will drive the commercialisation of innovative renewable energy technologies in Victoria, including renewable hydrogen. And earlier this year, I launched our first 2 hydrogen-specific grant programs to ensure the market and our economy is ready to take advantage of this emerging technology. Those 2 hydrogen-specific grant programs are the Business Ready Fund, which provides support for feasibility studies or business cases, and the Commercialisation Pathways Fund, which enables pilots, trials and demonstrations of renewable hydrogen. Together, these grants are providing $7.2 million in support for new and early stage renewable hydrogen projects across our state. We look forward to announcing the successful applicants for these programs very soon. We're also supporting our education sector to build the skills for green hydrogen through the Victorian Higher Education State Investment Fund. This has included $9 million to support the Deakin University's High Cell Technology Hub, a research facility that, when completed, will see the development, testing, demonstration and manufacture of hydrogen fuel technology with a focus on transport and heavy vehicles, storage and industry applications. $4.7 million for the University of Melbourne's Zero Emissions Energy Lab, which will see Melbourne University work with industry to develop a range of clean energy products, including new methods of hydrogen gas processing, novel hydrogen fuel systems for engine-based power generation and transport, and a new low-cost electrolyser for producing green hydrogen. And further, a $10 million support for Swinburne University's Victorian Hydrogen Hub, which will be a major national precinct to explore new hydrogen technologies, including clean energy vehicles and hydrogen storage containers. We are also partnering with clean energy leaders, including AGIG, ENGIE and other states on hydrogen blending. We're a founding member of the Australian Hydrogen Centre, and we've invested $500,000 through the centre to investigate the commercial potential of hydrogen blending using existing gas networks in regional Victoria and South Australia. A particularly exciting area of our renewable hydrogen industry development is the regional hydrogen technology clusters, which our government has funded in partnership with the National Energy Resources Australia. These 4 clusters in Victoria, located across the state, bring together core elements of our hydrogen industry, connecting businesses, universities, innovators, local and state government agencies and communities in developing renewable hydrogen projects. The clusters will accelerate investment and enable innovation and information sharing across the industry. Victoria has 4 of the nation's regional hydrogen technology clusters, more than in any other jurisdiction. This is another indication of our leadership in the sector. Located in Gippsland, the Mallee, Clayton in Melbourne's southeast and Greater Geelong. These sites have been chosen because they have the regional capabilities and resources to flourish as part of Australia's renewable hydrogen future. The development of a thriving renewable hydrogen sector in Victoria offers unprecedented opportunities for our state. And key to this development will be partnerships, ensuring vital collaboration across industry, government and research centres to drive this clean energy future. It is a very exciting time, and I do hope that you see very clearly that Victoria's agenda is an ambitious one, is one that is very much intertwined with where industry and the investor community would like to see us go in terms of our clean energy future. So thanks very much for the opportunity to say a few words, and I look forward to many collaborative arrangements and partnerships that are so important to developing this sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for providing those insights. The next speaker is Ms. Leonie Muldoon, CEO of the Department of Tourism, Trade and Investment, South Australia. Leonie Muldoon is the Chief Executive of the Department for Trade and Investment, and she has extensive trade and investment experience across multiple international markets, having worked with Austrade, most recently as a Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner, Singapore, and previously as Investment Commissioner for Japan, and later North Asia, where she was responsible for inbound investments from the region into Australia. Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner and Country Manager Japan, and as General Manager South Asia, carrying responsibility for India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Leonie is a lawyer by profession, having been a partner with Malson Stephen Jacques in their Sydney banking and finance practice. She also has commercial experience, having been responsible for leadership and management of a range of businesses for diverse sectors. Leonie holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Law with honors from Monash University and a Master of Law from Columbia University in New York. She also speaks Japanese. Please welcome the next speaker.
Oh, Leonie, it's Erin from the Convention Centre. I just need you to put your audio up, please. Leonie, can you hear me? Leonie, it's Erin from the Convention Centre. Leonie, hello?
Please be patient for a second. We're trying to work out the technical side of things, from my understanding. Hope I won't have a Boris Johnson moment where I have to utter, please forgive me, please forgive me. Please give us a second while we're trying to get Miss Leonie online. Thank you.
Leonie, are you able to hear me?
Do you want to take that computer out of the room? I'll grab it. Pardon?
Sorry, should I just take this off and try?
Can you hear us now? Yeah,
They can hear?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Apologies for the technical glitches. I'm hoping that you can hear me and also see me now. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land I'm coming to you from today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that I respect their spiritual relationship with their country. I also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's finally wonderful to be part of the Green Hydrogen APAC 2021 conference and to be connecting with you this morning from Adelaide. I'm excited to share with you some extensive activity happening in South Australia that is rocketing us forward on our clean hydrogen journey. South Australia is, of course, leading the country in clean energy generation and the transition of Australia's economy towards a low carbon future, much needed in order to mitigate the devastating effects of climate change. Our state's also a world leader in integrating renewable energy through interconnection, storage, demand management, and smart changing technologies. My department, the Department for Trade and Investment, is responsible for driving economic growth in South Australia by attracting foreign investment and increasing exports in sectors of competitive advantage and connecting potential investors to these opportunities. In that context, we've been working with industry in order to identify opportunities for investment in and export of hydrogen, accelerating South Australia and Australia's journey along the road to being a leading source of clean energy globally. Our vision is larger than just powering and fueling South Australia. We're looking at how we can support international decarbonisation. We believe that South Australia is well placed to become a world-leading clean energy producer and supplier to our global trading partners and assist with decarbonising their economies. Our low-cost power, leading regulatory system, and enduring commitment to innovation is helping us to lead in attracting decarbonisation of the energy sector, industry, and manufacturing. In South Australia, we have significant land mass and world-class wind and solar resources. Our aspiration is to reach 100% renewable energy generation by 2030 and more than 500% by 2050. It's our aim to have South Australian export ready for both blue and green hydrogen by 2025. With demand rising due to rapid global urbanisation and industrialisation, we believe that there's considerable opportunities for clean energy to help to solve the challenges of growing energy demand while managing impacts on the climate. Critical milestones in South Australia's hydrogen journey have been the introduction of South Australian Government's Hydrogen Action Plan in 2019 and the launch of our Hydrogen Export Modelling Tool in 2020. The tool combines spatial mapping, technical specifications, and commercial modelling, and it's delivered in a secure web-based interface. So what it does is it handles the cost of electricity, capital costs of relevant equipment, and is able to adjust based on export volume and production product, whether it be ammonia, MCH, or liquid hydrogen. And it provides the results of those inputs in a comprehensive output report. It's a tool that's accessible to all international clean hydrogen investors free of charge. And I encourage anybody that's exploring opportunities in a very concrete way to use the online tool and explore options available. As a state, South Australia is extremely fortunate with our world-class wind and solar resources. We are home to 69% of Australia's co-located wind and solar resources, with direct normalisation irradiation of above 20.5% per megajoule per metre squared of solar, and predictable wind speeds of above 7.31 per second of wind, sitting alongside each other. For us, this means that renewable resources are almost always available. When the sun's not shining, it's windy, and when it's not windy, there's a very high likelihood of sunny conditions. So, as you know, a challenge that many countries face in the development of hydrogen is the ability to produce the requisite amount of clean, cheap, renewable energy to drive clean hydrogen exports at scale. This, fortunately for South Australia, is not a problem. We've seen over $7 billion invested in projects, and we have another 20 billion in the pipeline. This means we already have over 6 gigawatts of capacity installed and under construction, and another 13.5 gigawatts of capacity, which is currently being developed. Our state has an estimated 55 gigawatts of potential developable onshore wind resources at an indicative capacity in excess of 45%. So we see ourselves as future leaders in the clean energy space. And that was first, I guess, footprint was established in 2003 when our first large-scale wind farm was commissioned. Since then, we've seen a number of world firsts in our clean energy transition. We're home to one of the highest penetrations of variable renewable electricity generation. We have well over 60% of our state's energy needs currently being supplied by wind and solar PV. We have the highest uptake of solar PV in the world, and of course the world's original and most famous big battery, which held the record of the world's largest lithium-ion battery for around 2 years. We have one of the most distributed energy systems in the world, with 1 in 3 businesses in South Australia with solar PV, and with over 1 kilowatt installed per capita uptake of home batteries. We support 4 grid-scale batteries, and we have 22 large-scale wind farms currently operational. And we also have Australia's largest 1.2 megawatt electrolyser located at Tonsley Hydrogen Park, South Australia. And we're set to supply 700 homes as well as industrial users in South Australia with renewable hydrogen blended with natural gas. The domestic offtake development is supported by South Australia's H2H Hydrogen Technology Cluster, which has over 40 members and supporters. The cluster is really recognised as our go-to group for the domestic hydrogen industry in South Australia. And we're currently progressing an EOI for a H2H hydrogen refuelling station network feasibility study. There are over 40 respondents to the EOI, and with strategic partners ready to engage, we look forward to kicking off the pre-feasibility study in the first quarter of 2022. We also find in South Australia, as across Australia, that many industrial customers are increasingly declaring their net zero strategies. And our H2H Hydrogen Technology Cluster is committed to building the hydrogen ecosystem and supply chain that will support the development of hydrogen hubs across the state. Great strides being made in the export of renewable energy in South Australia recently took a very significant step forward with the announcement by Marubeni Corporation of receipt by them of funding from the Japanese Ministry of Environment to develop a pilot project to build an Indo-Pacific supply chain for zero emissions fuel. Marubeni selected our state as the location for their project, a decision which I think further elevates South Australia's status as the next hydrogen and renewable energy powerhouse. The project will contribute to driving hydrogen exports and promoting joint credit mechanisms for the supply of low-cost green hydrogen from Australia to Indonesia. A significant focus for my department in the energy and resources sector is driving the development of a hydrogen export supply chain within South Australia. We're really looking at industrial scale export and hydrogen production plant attached to related infrastructure. We've consulted widely with key international hydrogen stakeholders to better understand the barriers to investment in hydrogen infrastructure. And we have a vision to have multiple export scale hydrogen production facilities focused on a broad range of carriers, everything from gaseous hydrogen, liquefied hydrogen, ammonia, and liquid organic hydrogen carriers established. We believe that the hubs could extend beyond hydrogen production and support broad-based industrial operations, including port facilities that would be for the benefit of export-focused businesses. Our own hydrogen modelling tool focused on the Eyre Peninsula region, and that area has been listed as one of 7 priority prospective hubs located around Australia, with Port Bonython set to lead a $15 billion hydrogen precinct in the next 5 years. In November, we submitted a South Australian government-led federal hydrogen hub grant bid focused on the Eyre Peninsula hub, and we had support from an extremely strong, globally recognised consortia of partners. In August, ENEOS Corporation announced a memorandum of understanding with Neoen Australia to jointly examine the potential for stable supply of affordable hydrogen produced from renewable energy in South Australia. We also welcomed H2U's announcement of their partnership with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to support a front-end engineering and design study for a proposed green hydrogen and green ammonia Eyre Peninsula Gateway project. The project aims to deliver green hydrogen for domestic markets and has a vision for supplying green ammonia to overseas markets moving forward. Santos and its project partner Beach Energy were also recently awarded a grant from the Australian Government's Carbon Capture Use and Storage Development Fund to enable Santos to prove up its world-leading carbon capture technology, which is now to be linked to support Santos's establishment of blue hydrogen production. We welcome the opportunity to talk to other like-minded national and international companies that are looking to explore hydrogen opportunities in South Australia. Your hydrogen journey is up to. My agency is very keen and well placed to assist and facilitate consideration of investment and export opportunities, introducing you to new investor partners, offtake partners, and potential project developers. South Australia's representation in overseas markets enhances our ability to build those government-to-government partnerships, as well as connect to industry and businesses to facilitate collaboration and establishment of consortia that can drive these critical projects forward. In particular, we have offices in Japan, South Korea, the United States, Dubai, the United Kingdom, China, Singapore, India, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. And we recently announced plans to open an office in Paris. All of our global representatives are based in Australian embassies and high commissions globally, and they're really on hand to assist you to work through challenges and provide market knowledge through face-to-face conversations about what the opportunities look like here in South Australia and how we can help you tap into them. They can guide you on your journey. We also have an investment portal, Invest in South Australia, which for those investors looking at what is currently available here, there's some critical information about specific projects, business opportunities, and the where to of establishing operations here. So as you can see, our global reach is broad, and we're very focused on supporting interested partners in all stages along the clean energy journey. In South Australia, we think that we're at a critical point in our hydrogen export journey. We have the climatic conditions, the ability to scale, we have the infrastructure and the technical expertise to become Australia's hydrogen powerhouse. And we believe that hydrogen will be South Australia's largest export industry in the next century. We understand, as everybody does, that innovation will play a critical role as we move to reduce emissions across key sectors and look to find solutions to climate change. We're leading the pack in transitioning to a clean, safe and sustainable production base, as well as being a consumer and exporter of hydrogen. We have very well aligned policies and programs, and we've given significant forethought to the development of very supportive legislative regime. So please reach out if you would like to know more about South Australia's competitive advantage or connect with some of my team locally or internationally. For those looking for some takeaways from my presentation or an outline of the key points today, a slideshow presentation is available for download, which also contains my contact details and those of my team. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to hearing from you and continuing the conversation in this very important and exciting hydrogen sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Leonie, for this terrific presentation. Our next guest is the Honorable Guy Barnett, Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction for the Tasmanian government. Born and raised on a farm at Hagley, I hope I pronounced that correctly, in northern Tasmania, Guy Barnett gained a law degree and a Master's of Laws at the University of Tasmania. Guy Barnett worked in a Melbourne and Washington, D.C. law firm before he established and managed his award-winning government and public affairs business based in Hobart and Canberra. After almost a decade representing Tasmania in the Senate, Guy was elected to the Tasmanian State Parliament in 2014 and now serves as the Minister for Primary Industries and Water, Energy and Emissions Reduction, Resources, Trade and Veterans Affairs. Guy is also a Diabetes Australia ambassador and an author of several books, including Our Heroes, Tasmania's Victoria Cross recipients, and Make a Difference, a Practical Guide to Lobbying. Guy is married with 3 children and enjoys cycling, tennis, squash, and fishing. Please welcome our next speaker. Thank you.
Is this working? Well, I hope you can hear me okay, and it's a great honour and pleasure to be with you at the Connecting Green Hydrogen APAC 2021 conference. Congratulations and well done to the organisers, and best wishes to my colleague energy ministers and other colleagues representing their positions around Australia, around the globe. Certainly as Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction in Tasmania, Tasmania's green hydrogen is very much an exciting prospect. And Tasmania hosts a world-class water resource and a world-class wind resource. And we're using that to advance the cause for green hydrogen. In terms of water, Tasmania is 1% of Australia's land mass. We have 12% of Australia's rainfall and 27% of Australia's water in storage. We have a world-class wind resource, meaning it's very windy a lot of the time in certain parts of Tasmania in our 3 renewable energy zones: West Coast, Northwest Coast, Northeast and Central Highlands. So we are ideally and strategically and brilliantly placed for the complementary nature of hydroelectricity and wind energy, which is delivered already 100% fully self-sufficient in renewable energy for Tasmania. We are a leading jurisdiction, certainly in Australia and around the globe, when it comes to clean energy and clean electricity. We hit that mark in November last year on the Granville Harbour wind farm on Tasmania's west coast. We hit the 100% fully self-sufficient mark, and we have now legislated this past 12 months to hit 200% self-sufficient in renewable electricity by 2040 and 150% by 2030. We have a big vision. That legislation has been passed with across the Parliament of Tasmania and is certainly globally leading. So we are uniquely placed to use our wind and water resources for our renewable hydrogen. This is all consistent with our Renewable Energy Action Plan released some years ago now. And of course, we also have a children's version of the Renewable Energy Action Plan. And I'm pleased to advise that's probably the most popular version of the action plan and one of the most popular government documents that's ever been released, the children's version. Likewise, it's consistent with the Renewable Hydrogen Action Plan. And that plan sets out our ambitious goals to produce green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen by 2022 to 2024, to be exporting renewable hydrogen by 2025 to 2027, and then being a global exporter and supplier by 2030. We're focusing on 4 key areas, and that's opportunities for use domestically and for export purposes. Likewise, we have provided financial support for renewable hydrogen projects. We are working on the regulatory framework and supporting infrastructure. And with respect to the former, it's great to work with other jurisdictions in Australia and the Commonwealth in terms of the regulatory framework, so that we can have a consistent, sensible, balanced approach across Australia for this new industry that's coming our way. And we're building community and industry awareness. Just 2 years ago, we launched in our budget a $50 million support package for the renewable hydrogen industry in Tasmania. And at the time, it was the most supportive financially of any new hydrogen industry in Tasmania. But a number of feasibility studies have been funded into green hydrogen, ammonia, and green methanol, and also hydrogen to replace natural gas for industrial heating. So this is consistent with our plans for a green hydrogen hub at Bell Bay in northern Tasmania. Bell Bay is ideally placed because of its access to road, rail, and port, and also it's already an industrial zone, ideally placed for a renewable hydrogen hub, and the complementary nature of our wind and water resources, where independent reports have identified Tasmania producing renewable hydrogen at 10 to 15% more cost competitively than our mainland counterparts, because of our access to wind and our access to hydro for firming. So when the wind is not blowing, we can have access to hydroelectricity as well. And I should indicate that Granville Harbour was the best performing wind farm in Australia in August at 57.5% capacity factor. So all this is consistent with the National Hydrogen Strategy, and I was there with Angus Taylor and my colleague energy ministers in Perth when the National Hydrogen Strategy was launched a couple of years ago. It's consistent with the federal government's plans to support hydrogen hubs around Australia, the $464 million support package for which we are very grateful. And just 2 weeks ago, we made a submission for Bell Bay to be a renewable hydrogen hub consistent with those guidelines. And we remain very hopeful of securing support from the federal government in that regard. I've mentioned access to fresh water, high quality infrastructure, and of course the workforce capability. And we already have major industrials based at Bell Bay and in northern Tasmania. So we look forward to building on that workforce. The federal government has worked with Tasmanian government to fund an Energising Tasmania project, which is to build the skills and capability of our workforce. We're appreciative of that. They're working with Skills Tasmania to build the workforce for the future so that we can build and operate and manufacture green hydrogen of a world-class scale. So in addition to that, I mentioned our world-class wind resource, and developers are assessing. We already have much of our 15%, in fact, of our electricity in Tasmania is produced by wind. And we're assessing thousands of megawatts of that in addition to the 570 megawatts that's currently online. And it complements our 2,300 megawatts of hydro capacity with our 30 hydro power stations and 50 dams, as I say, the largest water resource manager in Australia by a long way. So we're building on our hydro resources, and with pumped hydro, at Lake Sathana is the identified first pumped hydro facility in northern Tasmania. And that's all part of our plan to be the battery of the nation. And that's consistent with our plans for Marinus Link, which is a 1,500 megawatt cable from Tasmania to mainland Australia. And it is part of helping Australia transition to a new energy future, and with some 70 million tonnes of CO2 being removed from the atmosphere between now and 2040 as a result of Marinus Link, where the mainland and the national electricity market can access our clean electricity, which is affordable and reliable and clean. And that's what all of us want in Australia and certainly around the world. And in Tasmania, we have the trifecta with affordable, reliable, clean electricity. We also have an industry activation study and funding support for green hydrogen buses. And a demonstration trial is now underway for the manufacture and operation of some 3 hydrogen buses, and with plans for more. We're investigating green hydrogen applications in heavy vehicles and for mining and manufacturing purposes, and likewise in the marine sector. And as you know, we have the spirits of Tasmania, and in the marine sector, we see a significant opportunity as well. And we'll be using green hydrogen for other purposes across Tasmania in the years to come, and whether that's in rail or fuel substitution in our gas networks, industrial applications, or remote area power systems, just to name a few. In addition, we have opportunities to reduce our emissions in the Antarctica. And this is another exciting opportunity we've identified under the action plan and have had ongoing discussions with the federal government in this regard. This is an important opportunity. Hobart is the gateway to the Antarctic, and we have every expectation to continue our efforts there to strengthen Hobart's status as that international gateway to East Antarctica. International cooperation is fundamental to the development of hydrogen globally, and we're prioritising collaboration with key partners in Europe and also Asia and the Pacific. Increasing engagement is occurring in key Asian markets, notably Japan, Korea, and Singapore. And we've identified potential opportunities for project collaboration, technology innovation, and the establishment of green hydrogen supply chains. So we've progressed our renewable hydrogen international engagement and export strategy, and are focused on international engagement and export ambitions. And we've secured the Blue Economy Cooperative Research Centre to be based in Launceston, Tasmania. It's a $258 million cooperative research centre, which is focused on marine and renewable energy offshore. So there's a lot of work that's been done in that space. Tasmania is an island state surrounded by water. It's ideal for this cooperative research centre with national and international is based in Tasmania to provide opportunities for renewable energy offshore. So we are doing more in that space, and hydrogen is very much part of this innovation and vision. We're reviewing relevant existing legislation, regulations, and standards affecting the hydrogen industry in Tasmania. And as I said at my opening remarks, we're working with the federal government and likewise our jurisdictions across Australia and elsewhere to have a seamless approach to reduce the barriers and identify any regulatory gaps in this emerging industry. Certainly education and awareness is likewise important, and we're working on that. Tasmania's renewable energy future is very exciting, with the opportunity for thousands more in jobs to be created, billions to be invested. And in terms of skills, I've mentioned the need to build that capacity, and we're working on that with the federal government, for which we're very, very grateful. I will just conclude now by saying that Tasmania is strategically and brilliantly placed to lead Australia and the rest of the world in terms of the manufacture of green hydrogen. We believe we have the best of the best with our 100% fully self-sufficient in renewable energy and going to 200%. And any widget or any product made in Tasmania can be stamped 100% clean electricity. And that's now delivering further investment, opportunity and jobs, and a cleaner world. So in summary, We're very pleased and on behalf of the state of Tasmania to be able to make a contribution today at the Connecting Green Hydrogen APAC 2021 conference. And our vision is to deliver jobs, investment, opportunity, and a cleaner world. Thanks for the time today, and it's great to be with you. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your presentation. So far we heard from Victoria, from South Australia, and from Tasmania. The next session is a panel discussion. But before we head into the panel discussion, which will be around unlocking the potential of hydrogen in APAC, I believe there's a refreshment break, about 25 minutes. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Hello, this is Erin from MCEC. Have I got Patrick Gore and Tim Stock in the chat?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Hi, Erin, it's Patrick. Can you hear me? I can hear you, Tim.
Yeah, and I can hear you too, Patrick. And I heard her, but
Just a
then
moment, please. Sorry about that. We just had some technical issues. So I do have Patrick and I do have Tim. That's correct?
yes, can you hear us?
Yep.
Yep, can hear you loud and clear. Tim, I just need to let you know that it would be preferable that you would put your full name rather than stocked, just in case.
I don't know how to do that. How do I do that?
So
Rename.
you probably have to.
I've got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Just so people will be able to see and differentiate between presenters.
Yep.
But all good. So I can see you guys clearly. I can hear you guys clearly. You have your headsets on. That is fine.
Right.
During the presentation, though, I may ask you to be muted until it's your turn to speak.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yep. So other than that,
Do you have a preference for us to
okay.
be with headsets on, or did you want us to not have headsets on?
Oh no, absolutely have headsets on. It just helps with the audio quality as well on our end.
Yep, no, that's great. My preference too.
Okay, thank you very much. I will leave you guys to it for now, and yep, all good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. We'll just mute ourselves. Thanks.
Thank you. I should also add that the host for the panel is Dr. Jeremy Harris, and when he asks a question to either of you, that's probably when you'll unmute. Okay. Hello, Attilio.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. I'll just brief you the same way I've briefed Tim and Patrick. So during the panel, I'll just ask you to remain muted until the panel host, Dr. Jeremy Harris, asks you any questions, and that's when you'll unmute to answer the question. Can I just get you to say test 1, 2 or check 1, 2?
Check 1, 2.
Yep, that should be fine. All good, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Attilio, I may just ask you to mute at this moment. We're just about to start. Thank you.
I hope we all had a refreshment break. Welcome everyone back to the conference. Our next session is a panel discussion. I will briefly introduce our panel moderator, who will then introduce the panel members. And I think the provided time is about 50 minutes. I'm really looking forward to this. Our panel moderator is Dr. Jeremy Harris, director and founder of 123V Pty Ltd. That's the full text. Dr. Jeremy Harris is a founding director of a new startup company, 123V, that focuses on delivering end-to-end hydrogen projects. He brings over 24 years experience in oil and gas, electricity and renewables industries, and focuses on developing the right partnerships to deliver the projects of the future. Please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that introduction. Look, today's session is about how to release the potential of hydrogen. We have a great panel here, and I'm wanting to really just allow them to introduce themselves. Hopefully we've got everybody online. Yes, good, I'm getting the thumbs up, because we do have a combination of virtual and in-face panel members, so let's hope technology stays with us. First of all, we have Tim Stock, who's the project director for hydrogen and clean energy for the New South Wales Department of Primary Industry and Environment. And hopefully we can throw to Tim to give himself a little introduction.
Yeah, certainly. And so thanks, Jeremy. Really great to be here today. Sorry I can't be there in person. As Jeremy mentioned, I'm the Director of Hydrogen and Clean Energy at the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. So for the last 18 months, I've been leading the development of the New South Wales Hydrogen Strategy and the $70 million Hydrogen Hub Initiative. I'm also the chair of the National Green Power Accreditation Program that looks at certification for green energy. So it's really it's great to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to telling you a little bit more or talking about the support and how we're going to unlock hydrogen. I'll be with the New South Wales focus, but really looking forward to the discussion today. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, Tim. Next, we have Dr. Vicky Al from CSIRO, the Engagement and Strategy Lead for the Hydrogen Industry Mission from CSIRO. Vicky.
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. So I co-developed the Hydrogen Industry Mission and brought it to launch earlier this year. So CSIRO missions are major collaborative research initiatives between the research sector, industry and government. And the idea is to tackle challenges that no one organisation can solve by themselves. Hydrogen Industry Mission was the first mission to launch, which I'm very proud of for doing that. My background is in developing new initiatives, programs, advisory services. So I've started a few programs before, coming not from necessarily a technical angle, although I do have that kind of foundation, but really about trying to engage and connect and playing that translation role between the different sectors that I think is really important for helping to build this industry here.
Thank you. Next, we have Dennis Van Vijveld from Energy Networks Australia. He's the head of renewable gas, led the development of the gas vision in 2050. Dennis.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yes, I'm Dennis. So I work with Energy Networks Australia with the Industry Association for Electricity Transmission and Distribution Networks, and also for gas distribution networks. My role is working with our gas distribution members, mainly to look at the future of gas networks. Through that, I led the development of Gas Vision 2050, which I might talk a bit more about later. Basically, it's a vision across the sector, so brings together the whole supply chain from producers, suppliers, pipeliners, networks, appliance manufacturers, about what how we want to transition to gas sector. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, from Tasmania, we have Dr. Attilio Pignari. He's the founder and CEO of H2U. Attilio.
Oh, hi, Jeremy. I'm in WA today. It's nice to be with you virtually. I would like to be there in person. It's great that finally this conference is happening in person. Look, I'm the founder and CEO of H2U. H2U is a specialist developer of green hydrogen infrastructure projects. We focus on integrated green hydrogen, green ammonia projects for domestic and export applications.
Thank you. Next, from Intercontinental Energy, we have Lars Hansen, who is their Director of Upstream Energy. Lars.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks for everybody to be here in person and for people to join online. So Intercontinental Energy is a green fuels developer. We've got 4 projects, 2 in Australia, 2 in the Middle East, and focusing primarily on export of green fuels. Personally, I've got 12 years in renewable energy and being part of the electrification of our lives. And now this journey we're all on with hydrogen is to me really exciting. A couple of years ago, I listened to Dr. Finkel talk about hydrogen and how that was going to be the next big thing. And I think we all laughed at the time. So sitting here now 3 years later, and it is the big thing, not the next big thing, but the now big thing. So really exciting to be part of sort of that revolution of our lives. And looking around the room here, I don't think anybody was around for the Industrial Revolution, but it does feel like this is similar, and really proud and honored to be part of it. So thanks.
Excellent, thank you. And last but not least, we have Patrick Gore from Arup, who's their Global Head of Hydrogen. Patrick, over to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Very excited to be here. Sorry, I can't be there in person today. As you said, I'm Arup's Global Hydrogen Lead. I'm based in Melbourne ordinarily, but today in country Victoria. I've been working with Arup for the last 4 years, and before that with a multi and have been on this hydrogen journey for a number of years now. So very excited to be part of this panel. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, so that's our panel. And as I said, today's session is about discussing how to unlock the potential of hydrogen. We've heard already this morning from the Victorian, South Australian and Tasmanian governments, state governments, about their hydrogen plans and how they anticipate supporting hydrogen over the future. And I thought we'd sort of get the panel to discuss a few issues, kind of how we see governments, research and industry working together to unlock the potential of hydrogen. And of course, first and foremost in that is kind of policy and policy security with from the government's point of view. So first, if I can throw to you, Tim, as to how you see that policy space working to allow the collaboration between governments, research and industry.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And I think in policy certainty to enable, I mean, what it better to have that long-term investor certainty and being able to have some policy certainty to underpin that longer-term investment that's required is. So, you know, New South Wales, just for our own plug and how we're trying to deal with this, is we've just released New South Wales hydrogen strategy. So, you know, with an existing policy document and really a key pillar of our net zero plan. So we're committed as New South Wales government to do it, and we're committed to help the private industry transform New South Wales into Australia's largest consumer of green hydrogen. And we really recognise the opportunity that presents. So the way that we're dealing with the policy certainty and bringing this together is by having, you know, being transparent and providing 700 megawatts of electrolyzers, important to price of $2.80. But really, these targets are really supported by clear actions. The actions committed to. So we focus on areas and industry, but they also include research and how to bring it together. And some of those actions specifically target that collaboration. So we, in terms of policy certainty, we've committed to those actions, and we would probably state that as a jurisdiction we have the most robust and committed action plan with funding associated to it to others. So we really recognise that policy certainty requirement, and so and through our strategy we plan to deliver that. So just as a final note, the proof is in the pudding, and we've already passed a number of regulatory reforms through Parliament that shows how serious we are relating to those actions. So, but that's probably enough from me at this point. Jeremy, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Lars, probably coming from your point of view in terms of policy and certainty, coming from the intercontinental energy point of view, how do you see that working from the industry point of view?
Well, it's critical to have certainty for developers like us and Attilio and everybody else to invest. Our projects will be built over a 30-year period, so we're not investing for a couple of years ahead. And I think that certainty and that runway that we rely on government to provide is definitely shaping up. Example, recently from COP26, the Australian government going with a net zero target and commitment by 2050, which now is in Australia bilaterally supported. It's critical for us to have that, and we're seeing states coming up with strategies and plans as well. So that really underpins our business and is needed for then the private sector to make the necessary commitments for supply chain to come up with technology that's needed to make this happen.
Cool. And of course, once you've got past the policy, you really need to look at financing and funding these kind of projects. Patrick, from your background, what's your view in terms of how financing and funding elements between government and private industry can work together?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I think first we need to really be clear about which markets we want to use hydrogen in and then focus on those. So domestically, this looks at how we subsidize to accelerate these areas, whether it's heavy mobility or gas in the distribution network. Our traditional funding mechanisms that we've used for other electricity generation projects or other gas projects have always relied on a return on investment. And for hydrogen, this boils down to a levelized cost of hydrogen. Our research needs to gear up and move forward so that we can develop lower cost electrolysis if we're going to look at green hydrogen as the answer, and that will drive down the commercial the cost and increase the commercial viability. So in the meantime, though, if government wants hydrogen to be a major player, or wants to be a major player in the hydrogen industry and grab the first mover advantage, it has to be subsidized in some way. And finally, export markets as the primary market, I believe, creates instability for the domestic environment, and a domestic market will be the transitional foundation of our export market. So it has less risk associated with it, for example, from things like externalities. So all up, I think that, we need to, as I said, we need to focus on what we want to invest in and then drive that cost down and then look at other alternative funding mechanisms in the meantime.
And Tim, obviously government pay a fair amount of in this space. So what's your view on how the financing and funding can work together?
Yeah, it's as Patrick quite eloquently outlaid, it's one of our key roles is to leverage that private sector investment, but to give them the certainty to invest. So we are doing that through the 60 actions in the strategy. We're providing up to $3 billion worth of incentives Importantly, this is to look at that levelized cost of hydrogen production to drive that down below $2.80. We've designed our incentives to be, number one, to be stackable so that the hydrogen project proponents can access the different incentives that we have to drive down that cost. But importantly, also they have long tails and are designed for the life of the asset, so that there can drive that type of certainty, as we were talking about earlier, for those investment decisions. And these incentives, they range from straight grant funding to start and to kickstart the market, one would say, and get projects on the ground. And so we have a $70 million hydrogen hub initiative that's currently open for applications, with expressions of interest closing at the end of January. So that is to look to develop hydrogen hubs in the Illawarra and the Hunter, but also across New South Wales. A couple of other financing attributes which are worth mentioning is exemptions from electrical network charges for green hydrogen proponents who are producing in parts of the network that have capacity to do so, but also exemptions from other schemes and charges, and a hydrogen target or demand stimulation mechanism. All of these funding and finance aspects, really with that consideration of being able to leverage the private sector investment and bring it forward to be able to capture that first mover advantage that Patrick said, and to be able to capitalize on a strong domestic market for hydrogen, so that we can then access those export markets from a stronger base and enable two-way capital flows and what have you, from being by having those access to those incentives. So to give a bit of a feel of that, some of these incentives will be be available up to 2044, for example. So it really shows the level of longevity that we're trying to provide to project proponents so they can make those investments now.
Thanks, Tim. And leading on from that, as kind of Patrick indicated, there's a strong need for research and development. Vicky, how do you see the CSIRO interacting in that space?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So I think the CSIRO, as Australia's national agency, really has a role to play in connecting many of the parts of this puzzle together. We have connections with the universities, we have connections with many in industry, and also obviously very strong connections to government itself. One of the biggest barriers, I think, to accelerating the development of this industry is when you don't exactly know what's happening. You have rumors of things that are happening. You know that there are some projects that are taking place with not kind of really great certainty about how much any one person has managed to achieve. And until people actually start getting results, we're really still just speculating. And, it's in theory what you can achieve. So I think the role that CSIRO has to play, especially through a vehicle like the Hydrogen Industry Mission, is to look beyond the kind of borders of your own organisation and what you can do, but how you can help to create this industry so that there's something for everyone to play with.
Thanks. And another area where research is really taking off is the cooperative research centres, or the CRCs, that have been set up. Dennis, in your role with the Future Fuel CRC, how do you see them? Because they are really a collaboration between industry and research.
Yes, I think research is essential to drive this industry forward. And I'm a part of the Future Fuel CRC, which David Norman's in the room too. He's the CEO, so he can talk to you more about it. But Future Fuel CRC is really an industry-led collaboration. So the research they do is actually driven by industry to deliver on what needs to be done in the hydrogen and renewable gas space. It also actually started from the Gas Vision 2050. So when we launched that strategy in 2017, we worked together with the senior management of what's now Future Fuel CRC to develop that proposal in a whole work program, and we successfully got funded for $92 million over a 7-year period. And the key part of that is, as I mentioned, that industry leadership. One of the main outcomes I think that we also have in Future Fuel CRC is the research is really focused on utilisation. So, I've got a few examples that I just want to mention. One of the research projects we've done, which was a collaboration with CSIRO, was really looking at geological storage of hydrogen. It was one of those uncertainties that we didn't know much about it. We heard there's lots of potential for storing hydrogen in saline aquifers. Didn't know what the potential was in Australia. So through that collaboration, we better understood what the risk potential in Australia across all different parts of it. Another example I want to mention is the capability that's been developed as part of Future Fuel CRC, especially in terms of testing materials, testing pipelines, testing distribution network pipes. There's international facilities where we can get those materials tested, but apparently they're fully booked up for the next 3 years. So through the Future Fuel CRC, we're able to develop new capability, which allows us to test materials from all our networks and the different pipelines around the country. So I see research is really pretty essential.
Great, thank you, Dennis. And building on that research and funding is obviously the projects that come out of the back end of it. And there's a lot of press around some of the large projects, smaller projects. And the question is really, what is the right type of project? Is it big or is it small? Attilio, given from your point of view, I'd like to hear your insights in terms of the size of project we should be after.
Okay, thank you. I think going back to what actually Lars said as well. So, and what you just covered with Patrick. So we basically need certainty around projects, which is not just certainty around policy, but certainty around the financing environment, the understanding of this type of projects and stuff. So in our view, there's actually a stepping stone strategy to projects. So where we can get to the gigawatt and multi-gigawatt scales on the back of successful projects in the hundreds of megawatts. So the way that we're pursuing this, we have what we call a demonstrator, which is still a very large facility. So it's a 100 megawatt facility in the Peninsula, which is the first stage of a project, and it goes to gigawatt scale before the single digit gigawatt scale before the 2030s, and Glaston is designed to go right away into gigawatt scale. The key for us is to gain supply chain capability that take us there. So there is things that ought to be considered around the bankability of electrolyzers, particularly at the scale, particularly in the lifetimes that Lars touched base on. These are not refueling station projects where you can do the financing within a 10 to 15 year horizon. These are chemical plants that need to be financed over 30. They need to operate over a 30 to 40 years horizon and finance accordingly. That bankability is about the performance of the electrolyzers, the performance in relation to how they operate within the grid, if the grid connected or within a dedicated renewable supply base. And very important to the bankability is the insurability of the assets. So there's a need to manage technology risk. So for us, projects that deliver on that bankability as a stepping stone to larger projects is really important. And really the element there for us of bankability, or if you want the litmus test, is serving commercial loans and commercial offtakes. So using these early projects to start satisfying the needs, as Tim mentioned, of the domestic market and Patrick, and making sure that we're establishing a good supply base for the domestic market and getting that operational and social license ahead of then expanding for exports is really important. So reasonably large leading to much larger projects is the answer. Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Antilio. And Patrick, maybe if I could throw to you with your exposure to global projects, a comment around the size of projects.
Absolutely, Jeremy. It had to be one person who started speaking without mute. Bound to be me. So the Definitely. The global projects that we're seeing are at a varying scale. However, I think just to your point earlier about, the role of, small businesses and in this supporting domestic industry, like these smaller businesses have, the ability to, design these projects and move quickly, be more agile compared to some of the larger projects, which are going to take longer to get off the line and get going. And what we're seeing is that, traditionally, these smaller projects and smaller businesses would have that capability to get going, that have the technology, the understanding, that have a couple of really smart people in there. And I think there's a role for big business to actually leverage that. And where we're seeing that happen really effectively is in smaller organizations partnering with larger businesses to leverage that technology. And that's happening, globally. We're seeing it at the moment, particularly in Chile. We're seeing a lot of activity in Africa. And then, these markets that are developing markets have got smaller organizations in them, local or companies which are partnering with global businesses to drive this acceleration forward. I think one of the other things I just wanted to point on or touch on was the demand of the domestic industry, because I think, a couple of people have already said something on this, Attilio, and I think Dennis said as well, that, the domestic industry, they're screaming out for, infrastructure to enable their development at scale. And so we've seen this through our work on the National Hydrogen Infrastructure Assessment, where businesses and the domestic businesses, the existing businesses here in Australia want to transition. They see this as a pathway for them to, not only open up new markets, but to continue their businesses in a going concern, well into the future. So I think that there is a role there for, for all our small businesses and our big businesses to come together really and develop this industry at a rapid pace.
Thanks, Patrick. And as a founder of a small business, I hope that's correct. The final bit, obviously, that we need to support all of this development is skills. And we've just lost everything. No, we're back. And I think, as Minister Guy Barnett said, that we really need to develop the skills to support this industry. So I might throw it to you, Attilio, in terms of how you're finding skills and how you're developing those skills.
That's the key question. So the way we see that strategy scale up is about actually developing, if you want a sovereign capability or not just technology or technology and operational advantage. So we are indeed, like Patrick said, partnering with very large companies. We've got projects outside of Australia, but then the next wave. But we work with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. We announced Casale. We'll make some announcements there. If you really check, a great part of our partnerships are around integrating technology capability. And we're very lucky in working with these partners and also then being able to grow up the skills locally. So obviously, we've got some senior partners in our business, but we're investing very much in early career engineers. We've had 3 very successful hires just recently. They get really straight out exposure to the international R&D and strategy team at MHI, working with us on a lot of these elements, working with our technology suppliers. Our business is designed as a build on and operate, so we're really trying to grab the capability towards the operational timeframe of these projects. And similarly, we're investing in identifying contractors for the certain packages, be maintenance, being water treatment, being power system integration, that are based locally, that then we can work with on multiple projects. And so I think it is a supply chain build-up activity. That's why, going back to your previous question, the smaller scale really helps in building all of this ecosystem around the projects ahead of tackling the mega projects, hopefully maintaining strong technological and operational capability content from Australia. Thanks.
Thanks. And Vicky, obviously CSIRO can help support these skills and develop these skills.
Yeah, I mean, if we come to skills and just coming back to the topic of unlocking potential, this is a really interesting situation that we currently have here, which is it's a relatively small community that we still have. People are quite skilled, like small community, highly skilled people. If we want to unlock the potential here, what we need to do is move hydrogen into mainstream. We can't just have some niche groups of people, highly skilled, highly technical, to build an industry. And the really interesting thing about hydrogen here, and kind of comparing to Australia and how we've built our riches and our wealth, you can't just get a group of people, put them in a field and say, start digging. That's just not going to work for hydrogen. And so I think it's going to be interesting here to see, how does Australia transition to take advantage of, all of these kind of building blocks, really great starting position that we have when there is this skill problem that we can't just put people out there and expect something to happen. Do we transition ourselves from the way that it's been to have, raise the skill levels of everyone? And there's, some kind of major programs that need to happen with knowledge sharing, with kind of transfer of, many of these kind of inherent intrinsic things that you kind of learn from many years on the job, to kind of really accelerating at a very fast pace. And I think there's a role for innovation to play here, maybe beyond research, but innovation to simplify things. If we can do something to reduce this situation, so it's not really highly technical piece of kit, that you can place people in to do a project without raising that skill level, we might be able to have a chance to accelerating this, rather than the kind of longer term thing of having to think about how do we build a skilled workforce. And yeah, that's where I think innovation, the brilliance of innovation, is to simplify, make it mainstream. And I think that's how we could really accelerate and unlock potential.
Lars, in intercontinental energy, how are you finding skills?
It's a really interesting question, because we just don't think there's enough people in Australia to get all this done. And just a bit of perspective here, the International Energy Agency is forecasting 300 million tons of green fuels by 2050. That is absolutely enormous. Australia is really well positioned to be a key part of that, but we need to think differently. Intercontinental energy is all about scale. So I don't think there's a right size or wrong size. There's a space for every size. Our projects built out over the next 30 years will deliver about 30 million tons of green fuels a year. We need automation. So we need to skill up people, and we can do that in Australia. But in terms of feet on the grounds to construct all these projects, we're looking on how we can construct smarter and faster, to be honest. Otherwise, we won't get there.
Well, then let's move on to some of those projects that we think we should be looking at. We've heard a couple mentioned today earlier already, but ones that you hear talked about as a project that, or a way of utilising hydrogen quickly, is obviously through our gas networks. Dennis, how do you see that developing over the coming years?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I think there's a huge potential for increasing the blend of hydrogen in gas networks. I think it creates a massive opportunity to actually build the sector. So if we look at, a 10% blend across Australia, for example, that'll require between 250 and 700 megawatts of electrolyzers, which I know is small compared to what some people are talking about in terms of the gigawatt projects. But this will be distributed hydrogen, so it'll be hydrogen, smaller hydrogen plants across the country. It'll blend into the networks, which creates a easy opportunity to actually build that scale. So we get learnings from that, not just learnings from the electrolyzer, but also from the balance of plant, which I think is where we can start localizing that technology and getting cost reductions. It also creates an opportunity for mobility, because if you start blending hydrogen networks with all the distributed electrolyzers, there's off takes you can take from all those places. So you have a wide, you can get hydrogen across a wide part of the country. So I think there's really good opportunities there. There's already a few projects that have started in that space. There's the Hydrogen Park project, which the Minister mentioned this morning, and also the Western Sydney Green Gas project in Sydney. So there's already 2 projects blending hydrogen into the domestic network, and more coming online in the next couple of years.
Great. And Patrick, are you seeing gas sort of networks being utilised elsewhere outside of Australia?
So yeah, Jeremy, absolutely. Look to the UK and see what they're doing and the work that they've done about across the national grid. But especially, you know, just to Dennis's point about unlocking here in Australia, you know, we need the renewable energy to create the gas as well. And you know, you need an enormous amount of electricity to create what Lars, you said 30 million, was it 30 million megatons or something? Sorry, I missed that. But you know, just think about the amount of electricity that's required to create that. So you need to have an enormous amount of space to do that, and it's not just located. Mega projects, remotely located, are one thing, and they can target specific markets. But our demand is all over the country. So you know, the role of the gas networks is to, you know, connect up to these renewable energy, these new renewable energy zones, and to extract all of the hydrogen they possibly can to meet the future demand. And that's a case that's happening, I think, for a lot of countries. I mean, most of our global competitors are actually looking at other ways of making hydrogen, whether it's from nuclear or from, you know, gas with carbon capture and storage. And so they don't have the same challenge as what Australia's got, where we can make it from renewable sources. But the modelling that we've done just recently shows that if you want to meet the hydrogen demand in 2030, 40, and then 50, just on the east coast of Australia, we will overbuild the current reses that AEMO has already laid out. And that's just to meet the hydrogen demand, not to decarbonise our electricity system or anything like that. Just to meet our hydrogen demand, will overbuild that res. So those gas networks have an enormous role to play to then connect up to those new zones where they're going to be, to then have that common user infrastructure to facilitate all the unlocking of all the domestic industries, and including mobility and industry and commercial and all that sort of stuff. So absolutely, it's a big job to do, and the gas networks play a crucial role in it.
Great, thanks, Patrick. I suppose the other area that you hear hydrogen being sort of talked about quite a lot is in heavy transport and transport in general. Tim, in your work within the government, how are you seeing that developing?
Yeah, it's well, we feel that heavy transport really plays such a critical role in the development of a domestic hydrogen economy. I mean, it's also got a couple of win-win benefits in the fact that it's you know, it reduces the transport-related emissions, but of course, substituting diesel improves air quality, but has less noise pollution and also increased fuel security. So there's a whole bunch of different, I suppose, from that specific sector, some additional benefits from moving to green hydrogen. So. And just in terms of New South Wales, the scale-up potential for heavy transport applications. So if we transition 15% of our heavy vehicle fleet, that's essentially the equivalent amount of the total, you know, ammonia production in New South Wales currently. So there is a, you know, as a domestic market in New South Wales, having the largest, I suppose, heavy vehicle in Australia shows that it can be that offtake and that decentralized offtake, and it also has social elements to it as well that can be seen and felt around. It's very yeah. So we, out of our 60 actions in our strategy, we have that are specifically targeted at kickstarting the heavy transport industry, and this includes I suppose a signature funding to support the rollout of a hydrogen refueling infrastructure along strategic freight corridors. So really putting money where our mouth is to say, well, if we're going to support hydrogen and the heavy transport space, there is that chicken and egg problem. If you don't have refueling stations, you're not going to get the trucks to come out. So really our goal is to fund a number of to pick the heavy vehicle freight refueling corridor and actually fund a highway along that, so that logistics and freight operators can actually legitimately test their business models for what a decarbonisation or their decarbonised pathway in their future allows getting off diesel. So that is what we're looking to launch that expression of interest in the early part of next year. So we are, it's a key part that's through our whole strategy and the importance of heavy transport, and is also part of our Hydrogen Hub initiative as well. So in a nutshell, we're really keen to see that that heavy transport applications can be using hydrogen, as we feel that there are arguably technically limited on their additional pathways to decarbonisation, along with matching that with the economic opportunity that the hydrogen economy presents. Seems like a no-brainer to support that space.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, it certainly does. And look, these projects all need to either start big or grow organically. Antilio, how do you see your projects growing over the next couple of years within this space?
So basically, we've got what we call our medium-term projects. So Air Peninsula Gateway and Hubs Glasson are both designed for activating before 2025, meaning the initial capacity will be deployed before then. So Air Peninsula should be operational towards the end of 2023. And then its initial stage, and that is very much focused on satisfying domestic market needs, but having big enough quantities to start supporting export market trials. And we then see the expansion of the project and the activation of Glaston happening around towards the end of 2025, and then really completing the scale of these two projects within this decade. So we're very much seeing these as a necessary stepping stone, because one thing that probably we haven't touched base on, that delivering for the domestic market is also going to be a proof of capability and price points for the export market customers. The export market is enormous. If you just had things like early, just talking about green ammonia, if you had early market application in Japan, the shipping sector, we're talking about a scale of ammonia trade which is much bigger than the current overseas ammonia trade today. And then what needs to happen to get there, though, is that the relationships in the market need to come into play, but the infrastructure needs to come into play as well. To trade that much ammonia, the current ammonia trading infrastructure, meaning the logistics, the bunkering, are not there at all. It's a completely different trade. We're moving from a commodity to an energy trade. And so these projects in strategic locations where you can start building up that, if you want, logistics and delivery capability, are going to be key to then playing a big role into the export market. And we believe that the export market in the early days is going to be dominated by viable export terminals. So we've got great potential, we've got the skills, we've got the land, we've got the renewables, but the only thing that will make hydrogen exportable is viable export terminals. And we just need to make sure that they're built and operating within the time frame for Australia to play a role as an early market leader. Otherwise, we'll end up playing really well. The fundamentals are there for Australia, but we'll be more like the LNG industry experience. So we'll move a bit later. We move just when the market achieves scale, but we might not keep seizing some of the advantages around capability, skills, supply chain that we might see if we play a role earlier on.
Thank you. And so just in the interest of the time, so look, I think we've heard today from the range of panelists in terms of what the opportunities are and how we can go about doing it. Just a final question and a quick summary of, do you think Australia is ready to take advantage of this? Yes, no, and why is an answer. Tim, I'll just throw it to you. Do you think Australia's ready?
Do I think it's ready? Yes, I think we have all the. I mean, a key part of this is that we have bipartisan political support, and you can see every state has a hydrogen strategy. We have the Commonwealth having a hydrogen strategy and investing heavily in the space, as well as governments. So there's strategic, financial support available to get us there. But also, just reiterating the points that Attilio just mentioned, is about the strategic competitive advantages that New South Wales have. Like if Australia isn't ready for it, then there's arguably from first world nations we are critically placed to capitalise on it. So I absolutely think we're ready. I think the political discussion's been had, and that consensus is in, and so we are really ready to capitalise on those strategic advantages that we have, and we're now getting the funding to support it. So I absolutely think we're ready.
Great. Vicky, are we ready?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. So I think, we've heard from everyone. You come to these conferences and you hear how great Australia is with all the kind of fundamental building blocks that we have and what the potential is for Australia to take part in this. I think the really key question here is hydrogen from being seen as a technology and quite niche or new and emerging into something that is mainstream. Like the faster we can do that, the more easily we can get this happening. Because if you get that hydrogen literacy up, if you get the mainstream understanding why, then you will get the demand. I mean, the question here is that when there is a mystery, there are questions about whether or not to use it. And that's a major barrier to thinking about whether we can ever reach this potential that we have. And I think innovation, research, maybe more research, less research, more innovation is in how do we simplify things so that it can become mainstream. I don't need to know how it works. I just need to know that it does work and it's going to work for me every time. It's going to be reliable. And that's the way that we could actually unlock this potential here of hydrogen. I will just add one more thing, which is interesting, kind of something to think about. It's about Tesla. What is a hydrogen conference without talking about electric cars? But it's not about that. It's more about the approach that was taken there, just opening up the patents up to everyone so that an industry could be built. It wasn't useful for one person to know how to make electric cars. He needed everyone else to copy that and to drive that demand, to drive that standardization, to accelerate the building of that industry. It's not going to work for something that's mature, but for something new and emerging, it is something to think about.
Thanks, Vicky. Dennis, are we ready?
I hope so. No, I think we're ready. We already are, from a networks perspective, already are blending hydrogen into networks. So, I think we are already doing it, scaling that up over the next few years. I think one of the key things moving forward into the future is to start thinking more about that systems approach. I think Patrick mentioned the reservoirs will be built out with just hydrogen production, which is a great comment. I hadn't heard that before. But I think we really need to start thinking about how do we actually integrate the gas system, the hydrogen system, the electricity system, and how do we manage all these seasonal peaks as well. There's a lot of seasonal demand for gas, especially as we heard this morning from the Minister in Victoria. How do we actually produce hydrogen during summer and store that seasonally so we can use that for residential heating? So I think we're into do more work in that whole systems thinking.
Yep, I agree. Attilio, do you think we're ready?
Well, we better be ready. So I don't want to make it look like, it's all about technology and all of that. I think what Vicky said is really important. So it's how we deploy the skill base. Is not a skill base which is versed in hydrogen, but is versed in the fundamental capability they will require. I mean, it's plumbing, gas fitting, refrigeration, controls, high voltage electricity. High voltage electricity, that is going to be one of the key skills in demand. We stopped training people in the early 90s. And current large users into the market, the smelters, hold this capability really tightly. They need to share. We need to build the capability pretty fast. Otherwise, we'll go back into that cycle of fly in, fly out from overseas, which if COVID has taught us anything, creates a risk. We've been in Glaston, in and out as much as we could this year, and it's amazing. Glaston is as busy as it has ever been, because given that the maintenance crews from overseas manufacturers and support companies have not been able to come in, everybody delayed big maintenance and shutdown activities. And that is the boom and bust cycle curse, repeating itself, and now finding itself in a situation where all of these activities are happening all at the same time, because the plants need to be maintained. And literally, if you want a job today, just show yourself up in Glasgow with a screwdriver, you get a pretty good job. the problem is we need to plan for these things. And I think the initiatives such as the one that the CSIRO is leading, which is going to make, well, if you want, demystifying the technology gaps, because they're not huge. It's just a matter about making sure that we got people that can manage the technology. It's not about fundamental technology development, and planning for the skill build up to the CSIRO, the CRCs, and industry collaboration, I think, is going to be key for us if we want to achieve scale in the early stages of the market. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. Very quickly, Lars, are we ready?
I'll make it quick. We think we are. We've got two of our projects here, so we better be. We're in the same boat as Attilio. Australia is blessed with amazing sun, amazing wind, lots of land near the water, and that's where we placed our project. So I think we're absolutely ready. It's a massive opportunity. So yes.
Excellent. And Patrick, again, just throwing to you very quickly, are we ready?
I think we are ready for the potential, Jeremy. I think that to Attilio's point, the skills piece, having been involved in a number of mega projects, energy mega projects globally, the skills piece is the part that concerns me the most, where we're going to get tens of thousands of people to work on these projects across Australia is going to be something, a big challenge for us to resolve. But yeah, good luck to everybody, I say.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Look, sorry, we have run slightly over time. But if you do have any questions, please, I'm sure the panel members wouldn't mind receiving an email or a phone call to answer them. But if you could put your hands together for the panel members, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our moderator, Jeremy, and our panel members, Vicky, Dennis, Lars, Tim, Dr. Attilio, and Patrick. Our next guest is Dr. Phil O'Neill, who is the hydrogen transformation partner at Worley. And Phil O'Neill is a hydrogen specialist and a leader for green hydrogen initiatives within the Worley Group. Phil is focused on providing advisory services to global customers, developing early commercial scale projects, then supporting them through their journey to operation. Phil's focus on low carbon hydrogen sees him work with a range of clients to develop some of the most notable and ambitious medium to large scale hydrogen projects in the world today. Phil's advisory role in these projects spans across hydrogen production, transportation, conversion, and end users. Please welcome our next guest. And his title is very creative. It's around, can your project make the leap from PowerPoint to reality? Please welcome the next speaker. Thank you.
So what gets us into trouble is not what we don't know. It's not what we know for sure that just ain't so. So that quote is often attributed to Mark Twain, but scholars at the Centre for Mark Twain Studies believe that he never said it. Still, former Vice President Al Gore attributed the quote to Twain most famously in his documentary on global warming called An Inconvenient Truth. Isn't it funny how the attribution just ain't so? Never mind, it worked in that movie to get people to think differently. And I plan to use it again today, whether Twain said it or not, to challenge your thinking about what it will take to scale up green hydrogen production. It is clear that if we want to deliver on the objectives for net zero 2050, that hydrogen must play a big part. Yet it's a risky business. The current approaches are unlikely to work when it comes to scaling green hydrogen. We must challenge our thinking and be more skeptical about what we know for sure to fully understand the economics, supply chain constraints, and technical challenges to mitigate the risk of project failures and ensure success for our largest infrastructure investments. Let's explore what we don't know, what we know for sure that might need a second look, what I like to call the inconvenient truths of scaling green hydrogen production. Determine if your project can make the leap. So good morning, my name is Phil O'Neill and I'm a hydrogen transformation partner at Worley. Let's start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands on which we meet today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who have been stewards of these lands for more than 1,000 generations. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present today. At Worley, we're taking a step back for a fresh take on what is required to go to market in this area. We believe hydrogen is a key part of the low carbon future. We are finding that the best way to learn is to lean in and become deeply involved in every phase of these challenging projects. They go well beyond other projects in the energy transition, and they're definitely not business as usual. We are working on decarbonisation projects in some of the most difficult areas, including direct air capture of CO2, green hydrogen production for decarbonising refinery operations, and putting those both together to make methanol electrofuel or e-fuel. And we still believe the tremendous complexity of scaling green hydrogen cannot be overstated. We landed on 4 inconvenient truths. Number 1, there's no market for green hydrogen. High volume users are not a high value target for now. Number 2, this is so much more than renewable energy. It is not a solar farm. Number 3, hydrogen storage sucks, full stop. Number 4, scaling up has some huge execution and safety risks. So let's tackle them one by one. There's a market for green, there's a market for hydrogen. Where's the market for green hydrogen? Green markets already exist in electricity and are emerging in metals and services such as air travel. Hydrogen is a widely used commodity for making important products such as fertilizers and other chemicals. But who is paying a premium for green hydrogen and products? Green hydrogen projects that we see getting traction and making progress not only have technology partners, but offtake partners, someone who will accept some or part of the extra risk and cost of the green alternative. So what are the options? Accept early losses. We are working with an ammonium nitrate producer, preparing to blend small amounts of green hydrogen into the ammonia process, achieving a greener product and a plant debottlenecking. Ammonia seems like a great end use for hydrogen, however, it's competing against grey hydrogen at less than $2 a kilogram. Ammonia and other early applications that can provide large offtakes are potentially low value. Smaller scale projects. Find a niche where green hydrogen addresses constraints such as gas supply, infrastructure, distance to market. Queensland Nitrates project will supply their downstream ammonium nitrate process, offsetting significant ammonia costs and transport costs and exposure to ammonium markets. Be your own offtake. At Rotterdam, Shell is developing a 200 megawatt hydrogen plant, offsetting the use of grey ammonia in their refinery process, with potential for direct high value use and mobility for a portion of the production. Users of hydrogen are more likely to be able to develop green hydrogen projects, then find a high value use for the additional output as those markets grow. Find market mandates. Shell also have the potential to use the Renewable Energy Directive, or RED II, to extract additional value from the renewable fuel mandates, displacing expensive second generation biofuels. And share the risk. Nobian has partnered with natural gas utility Hessuni and received 11 million euros in EU funding to develop their first project. So Tim earlier spoke about the New South Wales incentives to attract private sector investment and the importance of making them long-term if we want to avoid creating a round of short-lived demonstration projects. On to inconvenient truth number 2. So much more complexity beyond just renewables. As you scale, you don't just get bigger, you get more of everything and more aspects you have to develop yourself. You may have to build a construction facility locally, a port, or even a whole town to support your project. And to get scale benefits, you need to drive down costs through a design once, build many approach. To stay agile enough to be able to accommodate changing technologies that will keep your projects at the bottom of the cost curve. So you'll need experienced partners in each of these areas. Transmission upgrades take a decade on average to develop. Other aspects can take 4 years or more. My colleague Paul Ebert is appearing on a panel this afternoon where he'll be discussing some of the outcomes of a recent study by Princeton University in collaboration with Worley. One of the key findings is that to make the seemingly impossible possible is to adopt a parallel approach. That saves time and brings other benefits too. But to run multiple projects in parallel means you need to have the right partners to do it. You need partners to have core expertise in these individual areas, and you can trust that they will get the job done. We have recently surveyed hundreds of C-suite level contacts across our key industries. And among the key insights we learned, sustainability performance is lagging ambition on key metrics, including decarbonisation ambitions and developing supply chains. Relevant to hydrogen, nearly 50% are saying they're looking to adopt hydrogen within 5 years and 1/3 within the next 12 months. And nearly 50%, and this is what they said about partnerships, 35% are looking to establish new partnerships to achieve their ambitions. Only by adopting a new way of working with community, customers, suppliers and contractors can the hydrogen mega projects that are required to achieve decarbonisation be effectively implemented over and over and over. So let's take a look at a real project with 1.5 for the deployment of Carbon Engineering's direct air capture technology, sequestration of atmospheric CO2. This is the first phase of the largest direct air capture facility in the world, capable of capturing 1 million tonnes of CO2 per annum from the atmosphere. At the heart of this project is a platform of partnership and innovation between companies. We know to achieve what we choose to achieve, conventional ways of working and delivering projects will not work. With 1.5, we have created an environment that brings out the best in people. As one collaborator said, if we're too comfortable, we know we're doing something wrong. It's an environment where it's safe to challenge the status quo and traditional ways of working. Once we deconstruct what we know, we unlearn what we have learned, and we create a safe space to have something new. Something that's never been done before can then emerge. That may sound a bit fluffy and soft, but what have we achieved? We have made significant progress in developing a meaningful climate solution, more collaboration than we originally imagined. However, the process was not linear. It can be messy at times. It's exactly that which creates the mindset needed to reach commerciality. And the secret? Aligned leadership, integrated team, aligned to a common goal, the courage of discomfort, and that deep-rooted culture of innovation. That gives us the confidence that we can make seemingly impossible projects possible. Inconvenient truth number 3, hydrogen sucks. Energy, lots of energy for compression and cooling. It also sucks up a lot of land area on your projects. But hydrogen storage also blows, sometimes literally, because it's flammable and explosive. It becomes increasingly more dangerous to store on a large scale, impacting site layouts and safe separation distances. So even though hydrogen storage has been around a long time, it's a big challenge for large facilities because of the impact of scale on equipment size, storage volumes, cost, and safety. Therefore, to ensure large project viability, storage solutions must be fully optimized and integrated into project design early on. Storage is not an afterthought. In fact, configuration modeling must include the entire supply chain, not just storage, to enable success. We've built these models and they incorporate the renewables generation, wind, solar PV, concentrated solar, and the electricity grid, taking hourly data from multiple historical years, identifying the periods of Dunkelflaute or dark doldrums. Energy storage using thermal batteries and hydro to manage that supply inconsistency. Green hydrogen production through electrolysis, so modeling the efficiency, the ramp up and ramp down rates. Carrier production, conversion rates, the minimum turndowns, ramp rates, and the hydrogen compression and storage. Looking at low pressure options, medium pressure, multi-cylinder packages at high pressure, and even buried pipelines to contain the hydrogen. Carrier storage to provide a buffer between production and offtake. And then the shipping capacity and schedules to make sure that your product arrives to the customer on time. By basing modeling on the fundamental inputs, renewable energies, which are the renewable energy resources, decisions can be made right along the value chain, including storage. By doing this, energy costs, CapEx, uptime, and OpEx can be optimized while fulfilling delivery obligations to customers. And finally, inconvenient truth number 4. Scale up risks, speed up risks. Design the equipment for safety. It's about the management of high consequence, low probability events. As consequence increases, probability needs to reduce to manage overall risk level. Hydrogen has a faster flame speed, wider flammability limit, lower ignition energy, and requires less mass to have a detonation than most hydrocarbon fuels. To give you some perspective, the mass of hydrogen required to initiate a detonation is 4 orders of magnitude lower than natural gas. So we need to understand how to do this, then scale up. For example, for a commercial pilot's license, you need 150 hours of training. However, to become a captain of a Boeing 777 or A380, you need 7,000 hours of flying. We can build this industry safely. We understand the hazards. We know about all the ways to kill humans. But some of these issues have not been considered at a bigger scale. We need to make sure equivalent safety in the new energy industry. The community expects it and the regulators will demand it. So we need to take the time to gain experience, test new situations and get our confidence before we hand over the keys to the A380. Also, think of site and surroundings. There are various hazards and more points of failure, explosive mixtures of in hydrogen, we're not only going from small to big, but from the few to the many, potentially hundreds of individual systems with all the complexity of operations, connections, isolations, etc. that comes with it. Remembering that hydrogen blows, we need to take our experience in other industries such as refining and chemicals and bring that to green hydrogen developments. Only bigger, higher pressure and more potential points of failure. Consequences of not getting it right are potentially catastrophic, locally and for the industry. There is mounting pressure to move fast, go big, be cheaper to realize hydrogen's decarbonisation role. All of these pressures will put strain on skilled resources. There will be companies, teams, and individuals working outside their core skill areas, responding to speed and cost imperatives. There's another very real aircraft analogy here with the B737 MAX development. The existing aircraft was modified in record time to compete with more modern airliners with fatal consequences. Software systems were used to overcome basic design shortfalls. Let's focus on safe design, not patching inherent flaws to make it safe. We may only get one shot at this. We cannot cut corners or ignore safety risks. A major disaster could set the industry back a decade. Can we afford to wait that long? At Worley, our purpose as a company is to deliver a more sustainable world. Our board, shareholders, or CEO didn't tell us this was our purpose. Our people chose it. And the world that we aspire to will be driven by environmental and social value in addition to financial value. We can do this. The growing appreciation of the importance of net zero solutions makes this change inevitable. Our collective experience and knowledge, plus the expertise we will develop along the way, will allow us to overcome these challenges. We can be market makers, bringing key partners into the tent to create self-sufficient projects for development, production, and offtake. We'll deal with complexity with a focus on replication, not repetition, in delivery. Standardize what you can while creating space for further innovation to add value. We can integrate hydrogen storage into the system as a whole to optimize the value chain through an end-to-end understanding. And we have the skills already in the industry to manage the escalating safety risks from increasing size and equipment count. We just need a sensible series of steps to get to our destination. Worley is a key player in the hydrogen market. And as our paper with Princeton, we expect our highest value will be delivered in collaborations that involve customers, suppliers, governments, and communities. I look forward to connecting with you here at the conference or afterwards to discuss how we can make this industry a collective success. As for that quote, let's make sure we work together to find out what ain't so as soon as we can, so we can unlock green hydrogen's full potential in our APAC region. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Phil, for this great presentation and really interesting angle to look at hydrogen in terms of inconvenient truths. Our next session is a panel discussion with a huge topic, a vast topic, and a huge panel, all very senior experts. And the topic is about how to expedite the hydrogen economy, creating infrastructure, policy framework, and investment. The panel will be moderated by David Kavanagh, Managing Director of Integrated Energy. He brings 3 decades of professional engineering experience with locations spanning 6 continents. This includes multidisciplinary project scoping and delivery for leading energy and resource companies, including Infinite Blue Energy, Hydrogen West, Woodside, Shell, BP, ConocoPhillips, and Engie. From project feasibility through design, construction, commissioning, and operations. He and his team have extensive experience in clean energy, in particular creating a green hydrogen upstream, midstream, and transportation ecosystem, both in Western and Eastern Australia, engaging private capital and creating a multi-billion-dollar green hydrogen market. Please welcome the moderator on the stage, or is he virtual? I believe it's a virtual moderator. Yes, we're in the virtual world. Thank you very much. Please welcome our moderator and our guests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And a real pleasure to be part of this important conference. And yeah, we're fortunate to address the session on expediting the hydrogen economy. we're able to explore both business models, policy settings, and how to engage and grow the market. And my panel today are both virtual and physically with you. So we have on stage Amy, thanks Amy, as well as Luigi, my colleague from Integrated Energy. Thank you, Luigi, for being support for us there. I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves briefly. First of all, Stephen, if you could say hello, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be on the panel here. Managing Director at Infinite Blue Energy. I've been working on our green hydrogen project for almost 4 years now, and it's glad to see it's coming to fruition. And some early earthworks have been performed. Smith background is 20 years in the oil and gas sector, running offshore assets and onshore production facilities. So that's Stephen Gold.
Thanks very much. And Sean, would you like to introduce yourself, please, from Gemini?
Yeah, thanks, David. Good morning, everyone. My role at Gemini is Executive Manager for our regulated networks, and I've spent much of my career in a variety of roles in electricity and gas distribution networks and gas transmission as well. Relevant to today's discussion, I'll bring the perspective of running a gas network which supplies 1.5 million customers in New South Wales, and certainly running a gas network in these times is very, very interesting with much of the energy debate at the moment. And just for a little bit of context, the network provides around 90 petajoules per year, or perhaps a peak capacity of 5 gigawatts on a typical winter's evening outside of solar production times. That's about half of New South Wales peak demand, and that's really the context that we're looking at the future role of renewable gas, the importance of transforming a methane-based network into a renewable gas network. And one of the things that we've just recently done has been launching our own hydrogen hub, which is a hydrogen plant in Western Sydney, which is a great way of showcasing some of the future. So look forward to talking about that through the panel session.
Thanks very much, Sean. And of course, we need to be steered and kept within the right boundaries and given the right freedom to innovate and compete. So Ben, would you like to introduce yourself, please, from that side of things? Thank you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, great to be here. I am the Chief Executive of the Australian Energy Market Commission. We are the statutory policymaker and rule maker for both electricity and gas markets in the national electricity market. We really are about the system and how do you get the system working for the best long-term interests of the consumer when you've got this amazing transition that's on. And hydrogen's of interest to us. We've got a review underway, which I'll talk about later. But in addition to the review, it's really interesting because of the way it can intersect both gas and electricity markets and the role it can play in addition to getting it into the networks that Sean's talking about. There's roles it can play in both gas and electricity markets as well.
Thanks very much. And James, Australia is a big wide open space. Would you like to introduce yourself, please? Great to have James here to consider remote applications.
Sure, thanks, David, and thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm based in Brisbane and our borders are almost open, but not quite. So I look forward to being able to travel again. I'm the CEO of EDL. We're a global leader in sustainable distributed energy with 97 power stations across 5 countries and 3 continents, and now more and more gas processing sites where we're taking biomethane and turning it into renewable gas for pipeline injection for use in direct use and also in transport. And I look forward to talking about application of hydrogen in the remote space in Australia. As David said, we currently own and operate 25 remote power stations across many areas that are very off-grid, but also talking about green gas generally and the role that can play in helping to decarbonise many sectors in Australia, including many that are hard to electrify. So I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks very much, James. And of course, we need some agreements to make all this happen, to tie all these partners together. Dan Feldman, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, David, and hi, everybody. My name's Dan Feldman. I'm a partner at Sherman & Sterling, which is an international law firm. I'm calling in from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates today. I lead our global hydrogen industry team, which is a team of 30 partners worldwide, all over Europe and Asia and the US and Latin America, focused on hydrogen projects, particularly on the larger side around the world. We've been doing this now for a number of years. We were really the first law firm to have a global hydrogen industry team. Some of our projects include the I think it's 9 billion Australian dollar Helios joint venture between Air Products, Aqua Power and NEOM, who's our client in Saudi Arabia. This project is going to deliver 650 tons a day of hydrogen for export around the world. It's the most advanced of the export mega projects and is entering into its project financing phase at the moment. So very, very advanced. And it's going to be the first to be putting green hydrogen in the form of ammonia on board vessels to transport around the world, primarily for the transportation market. We've also got projects in Morocco, in the US. We've got blue ammonia projects here in the Middle East as well. So we're very much interested in the development and structuring of these mega projects. We're very happy to bring some of the experiences and lessons we've learned around the world to how to get such projects going in Australia.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dan. And it's fantastic, Amy, to have you there in person in Melbourne. Would you like to introduce yourself, please, Amy?
Sure, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. So my name is Amy Philbrook. I've recently joined APCO Australia, and I'm the director of the Clean Energy Innovation Park, which is the 10 megawatt project in WA, and that will be operational in mid-2023. So that was one of the 3 successful projects in the ARENA large-scale funding round. I know through this role, so I was in 7 years helping look after the hydrogen and energy portfolio.
Thanks very much. And I noticed there next to you, Luigi Bernardio. Lou, would you like to briefly introduce yourself for the audience, please?
Hello, everybody. Luigi Bernardio. I'm the managing consultant at Integrated for David, today's moderator. And I have over 30 years experience in hydrogen, delivering hydrogen projects, not just here in Australia, but overseas as well. And we provide the full scope of services from market assessments, detailed engineering design. We also have the ability to raise finance for your projects. So if anybody wants to make an approach later, feel free to say hello.
Thanks very much, Luigi. So when I look at the ecosystem for green hydrogen globally, of course, one of the big influences and events recently has been Glasgow and the COP26 meeting there. And I'm particularly interested in panelists' view on how has that changed the perspective for getting projects up and executing them. I know from our side, it was a real pleasure to be invited to share on the Australian stand, and we had 4 of our projects displayed there. And one I was particularly proud because it was actually exporting Australian know-how to the UK. Ikana International to set up a new model for hydrogen generation and distribution in the UK, as well as projects like Hydrogen West, which are 26 stations across WA for hydrogen, and of course Stephen's project, which he'll speak to more recently. So that might be a good point. Thoughts around the room. Stephen's been through the experience of taking a project from the beginning to large-scale implementation underway. Would you like to kick off, Stephen, with your thoughts of the influence of Glasgow in shifting the environment for hydrogen recently?
Yeah, a key thing that I took from some of the presentations that I watched, I was quite inspired by FFI, to be honest, and FFI and their commitment, what they're doing around the world, seeking new opportunities, projects to transition. And listening to Julia Shuttleworth on FFI or FMG predominantly, where they announced that they're one of the world's large polluters with their iron ore, their trains, their ships. And the inspiration message was from Julia was, if FFI can transition big ships to green ammonia, they can transition all their large iron ore trains to green ammonia and also deliver liquid hydrogen to the global markets as well. If they can do it, everyone can do it. And so a very inspiring message at the first days at COP26 that led on to other commitments from global leaders. So it ties into what we're doing at Infinite Blue Energy here in WA as well, with our early production system that we're working on right now, and also the bigger project at Aerosmith. So I think you can see a bigger commitment from world leaders, and hopefully we see that commitment as a lot more noise here in Australia now than what there was pre-COP26. So I can only envisage that we're going to see a faster transition in the fossil fuels and to reduce global warming and CO2 emissions. So, yeah.
Very good. Thanks, Stephen. And I wonder if you'd like to comment on the importance of having offtake in place, offtaking markets established early, and your thoughts on the emergence in hydrogen in the heavy transport sector, for example.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working almost 4 years on our project, and we've finished all the engineering and wrapped it up tail end of last year. Started working on the offtake, and getting the offtake takes time. And not just looking at well, where's the offtake going to go? It's looking at the complete supply chain. So that's one thing that we've done specifically in the last 12 months, has been focused on the complete ecosystem. So building a hydrogen plant's one thing, but having a buyer for the downstream side. So we spent a lot of time working on the midstream and downstream side, and right now we're unfortunately having resources inside Infinite Blue Energy tied to mapping out trucks and buses and cars, and we're making huge progress there with the first initial agreements for trucks coming in at this moment in time. So again, it takes time to pull all this together, and I guess it's the same for everyone. It's moving into the hydrogen space. There's a lot of people talking about it. It's how you complement from the plant to the end user. And one thing in Blue, we're focused on the heavy transportation initially for Aerosmith plus our early production system, and then expanding internationally with liquid hydrogen for export. We're not focused on that domestic pipeline, especially here in WA at this moment. So again, it goes back, heavy transport takes time to pull that in place, and then the infrastructure to refuel.
Thanks very much, Stephen. And James, you have quite an international portfolio, not only Australia. Do you have a perspective on the influence of Glasgow in aligning political leaders within Australia and expanding that internationally?
I have to be very careful in answering this question, David.
Okay.
I think that Glasgow has had an impact. It's prompted movement at the station, if you like, from both sides of federal government in Australia. But it's been really pleasing to see the state and territory governments making the moves that they have in supporting decarbonisation across the economy. So I think inevitably as other countries, particularly countries we trade with, have tougher rules and regulations around decarbonisation, then Australia will eventually follow suit.
Very good. And I wondered if you'd like to expand a little on your experiences, both in the feasibility and heading to implementation of green hydrogen across Australia. I know you've considered a range of cases and applications and some crossover into green gases.
Sure, and thank you, David. I think the starting point is probably the remote space, as we said before. We've got 25 power stations across Australia that supply communities and mine sites that are very much off-grid, and traditionally those power stations have been powered with fossil fuels. That's been changing over time, and now every single tender that we deal with for customers involves a customer asking how they can ramp up the amount of renewables in that off-grid solution. And at the moment, we're delivering hybrid renewable solutions to customers that generate 75, 80% renewables reliably across varying loads at all times at a very competitive cost. The nirvana is to try and get that to 100% renewables. And we've been studying a lot of different types of technology that might be applicable in achieving that 100%. But the reality is that the cost of any solution, including hydrogen, including batteries, raises significantly and rapidly above 90% renewables. We've conducted a couple of studies recently in Western Australia on using hydrogen to get to 100%, and our findings are perhaps not too surprising, but the challenges include the amount of storage that you'd need in on-site in delivering that amount of renewable energy from green hydrogen. Obviously, the sheer scale of the renewables you need. You need 3 to 5 times more energy produced in storing hydrogen from renewables than actually just using the renewables directly in your energy source. So space is an issue, and the capital cost of that renewables is an issue, and water is another issue that makes it challenging. But we're determined to keep investigating, studying what the solutions might be. But I think what we'll probably end up with is a solution whereby about 80% of the renewables are generated on site for the particular application, and then the remaining 15 to 20% will be trucked in. It's probably more economic to produce the hydrogen in a hub that's not too far away and to truck it in as needed rather than to try and produce and store the amount you'd need on site. So we're looking at that type of application at the moment. Sorry, I was just going to go on to green gases, if you like, David, or would you like to explore something different?
Just make the conclusion you draw was a similar one to our work looking at hydrogen demands around Australia for transportation, and we concluded the large scale projects like the IBEs can produce low cost liquid hydrogen, which is then economically transported and used. And go on, James, you're mentioning other gases.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say that, you asked about other countries and what might be happening there. Well, we at the moment are ramping up to producing about 8 petajoules of renewable natural gas in the United States. And that gas is directly injected into natural gas pipelines, and it displaces fossil fuels in those pipelines. It's been backed by a very successful federal scheme in the US. It's displacing billions of gallons of diesel in heavy transport on the road in North America. And last year, 50% of the gas used in transportation in the US came from renewable natural gas in the form of CNG or LNG. It's a very successful scheme, and a lot of biomethane being used for great purpose in terms of decarbonisation. In Australia, we're planning several green gas plants, and this does segue into hydrogen. We think that the cost of green gas into those projects is around about $15 a gigajoule with the right schemes across the states and federal government in terms of what the clean energy regulator is looking at the moment. But the important element here is that hydrogen can be produced from green gas. It's just another step. Once we've produced renewable natural gas or green gas from biomethane, and the feedstock here comes from landfill, we can take one step further with steam methane reforming to turn it into green hydrogen. And that can be done close to load, if you like, close to demand for hydrogen, because a lot of the sources of feedstock for green gas are landfills close to cities. And we can do it at a price, probably a cost price, however you want to look at it, at about $5 a kilogram, versus what we believe the current cost of green hydrogen from electrolyser to be at about $15 a kilogram. So our biomethane in Australia that we currently have could produce more renewable hydrogen than a 10 megawatt electrolyser, and we're looking at projects to establish that and to establish that market for either green gas or green hydrogen in Australia. And importantly, we've recently been awarded a grant by the federal government to look at sequestering the CO2 that comes from that biomethane process. We get a very pure CO2 stream, and we're looking at injecting that CO2 into concrete. It forms calcium carbonate in the concrete. This is done across the US, and it reduces the amount of cement you need in concrete, and obviously helps to decarbonise the construction industry as well. So there's many interesting developments afoot, many types of technologies that we're looking to employ in that green gas, green hydrogen space, drawing on our experience in the United States.
Thanks very much, James. And Amy, you've had a fair bit of international perspective on this, both in gases, but I'm also interested in your thoughts on the contribution that green hydrogen can make to national targets, like a 43% reduction. Do you have a perspective on that from your
Thanks, David. So, I mean, firstly, I'd like to just completely agree with James that, you know, there isn't a better action that Australia can take other than taking energy from waste, and kind of what James is proposing, and kind of grouping in hydrogen with renewable natural gas or biomethane is important and can provide gas peaking, as he kind of said. When you talk about kind of long-term targets, that's when kind of the issue of scale comes into play, and where hydrogen can play a role. So, you know, there just isn't enough waste in Australia to replace all of the natural gas use with biomethane. That's not to say it's not important to happen and has a significant part to play. But if you are looking to go net zero at 2050, and you want to keep your gas infrastructure and you want to replace natural gas, then it has to include hydrogen to do that. Simply because there isn't enough biomethane resource to make that happen. So I think that it becomes that question that, you know, and I think that people that are in the hydrogen space, there's always two sides of this. Do you kind of electrify everything, or do you maintain your gas networks? And so there's a lot of evidence and a lot of reports, and, you know, Dennis as well across this, about the expense of advancing the electrical infrastructure to be able to electrify. And this is where renewable gases, biomethane and hydrogen can play to meet those 2050 targets.
Yeah, thanks very much, Amy. And I know we've been looking at electric vehicle charging through the outback of WA, and we certainly found the capital cost is probably much higher than just hydrogen transportation applications. And Sean, really interested in your thoughts if we move downstream to the interaction with customers in mass scale, your perspective on how that can be used to grow the green hydrogen market, and how we keep the whole community with us on that journey. Would you like to expand on that, please, Sean?
Yeah, David, I think it's a really important piece to think about the customer, the people that are actually going to be using our renewable gas products, and think into the future. You know, there'd be quite a diminishing role potentially for gas networks under different scenarios, and that could have real impacts across the market. Because I think a lot of the work of the gas networks is undervalued, and to replace it, we're really in a race, I think, to get biomethane and hydrogen to decarbonise our the way we're thinking about it initially is really with biomethane and low-level hydrogen blends around about up to 20%, which can really operate without much technical change to the way that we work. So I think
Give me just a minute. Can I ask everyone to mute if you're not speaking? Julie, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Sean.
Thanks. That's a little better. Yeah.
Go ahead, mate.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think from a customer perspective, there's a number of things that we need to do to create that future. And I think the first thing is just building the stakeholder and customer confidence around hydrogen. You know, renewable electricity is well understood. We've got solar panels on 1 in 4 homes across the country, but renewable gas is starting a decade behind. And we've just done some research of our customers, and we've got about 20% of our people think that hydrogen is environmentally friendly and sustainable. Whereas when you ask that question for solar energy, it's over 60%. Wow. And of of these customers that we speak to, about 80% admit that they currently know nothing or very little about renewable gas. And, you know, we're all here on a hydrogen conference, so we're all engaged in it, but most of society and the community is not. But 2/3 of them are saying that they do want to know more. And I think that's the opportunity that we've got, really, to build awareness through our communications, to tell them that hydrogen is safe, zero carbon, and that projects are starting to happen now. And that's a really, I think, virtuous cycle. If we get customers on board, then invariably that will follow to political voices as well, in terms of reflecting the views of the community. I think large customers as well, they're very active in this space now, and sort of really driven by the 2050 net zero commitments that pretty much most businesses have made, and putting a lot of effort into it, recognising that they really need it for the high grade heat and gas specific processes that will need to be operating in a decarbonised way in the future. And I think where a lot of this comes, the rubber hits the road for us, is when we work through our regulatory processes. We have 5 yearly price review processes with the AER, the energy regulator, which really determines the investments that are made across the network. And early next year, we'll be commencing some deep customer engagement to hear from customers, large and small. What are they seeking in terms of a decarbonisation pathway for our gas network? And ultimately, this is all about that balance of the trilemma, the balance between cost, energy reliability, and decarbonisation. And, you know, we think that it's a good idea to connect new hydrogen and biomethane facilities to our network, and that's in the interests of all customers. And similarly, making some no regrets investments around future-proofing the network for 100% hydrogen scenario in the future also makes sense. But we need to take the time to discuss these complex issues. Customers have a low awareness today. We need to invest that time to have the right conversations and build that knowledge. Ultimately, if our customers are telling us that they don't want us to make these investments, we won't. It's really critical that the customers are on board. And then I think the way the regulatory system's evolving, you know, the AER's now much more taking a shift towards backing in what customers want rather than intervening. And in some cases that, you know, may well require some amendments to the rules, which is where Ben's team at the AMC starts to come in terms of that the transition towards renewable gases. So yeah, certainly the customer's got to be very much in our thinking with how we're making this transition.
Thanks very much, Sean. I think you made a very good point there about safety, as came up in the previous session as well. So certainly from our side, we invested about $1 million of our time making sure we had safety understanding for hydrogen, right? Building up with what we've done in 3 decades in oil and gas. And in all of our projects, we tackle that first. So all of those stations are designed first and foremost with safety in mind. And it's certainly a big feature of the work we're doing on the Australian Standards Committee as well, in writing the mobility standards for hydrogen for land, sea and air. So and you know, some of our locations are really critical infrastructure. And the second meeting is the whole board room full, 2 hours on hydrogen safety to get them up to speed and happy for things to proceed. So no, I think you make a very important point, that role of public engagement and communication. So Ben, that's a nice segue into your leadership in advising regulators on what is a good sustainable framework to enable this market to grow. Perhaps you'd like to share on some of your current work and findings.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks, Sean. That was a good lead in. And yeah, certainly what we've got on foot at the moment is, you know, there's lots of trials happening about getting hydrogen or renewable gas at low level blends into the market. But the regulatory framework needs to keep up. It actually is not set up, it's not set up to deal with that. And so we've got a review tasked by energy ministers to look at the framework for low level blends to begin with. And we've also got a rule change for the Victorian market about getting low level blends into the distribution network there. And really what it wants to do is you know, remove any blockages for those projects about getting those blends into you know, the existing network. And so it's looking at definitely the consumer protections point of view, and I really back up Sean's point about taking customers with them on the journey here. It's also looking at pipeline regulations, market transparency, and just how they participate in you know, gas markets and retail markets. And so It's underway. We had a consultation paper out earlier this year. We'll have a draft report in March next year with some final recommendations to ministers in September. So I put a plug there for people. It is a really important thing to get right. So have a look at our website if you want to get involved. And it is kind of the first step, though. I do think to keep going, picking up on Sean's point too, you need to look at the framework, which will be harder and more complex and even more important to take people with you on those consumer or the network needs to deal with that. And I think that's the next phase. And the other thing that we're interested in at the Commission is, well, what else? What's that intersection with the electricity network? Because hydrogen does bring really unique characteristics, and so gas-fired power stations are now being set up to take hydrogen, or they could do. And also, you know, there are markets being set up under the Energy Security Board and the Commission on Electricity, you know, electrolyzers or level of energy required to get them up provides both a risk and opportunity to the energy sector in Australia. And it's really getting that risk and opportunity right moving forward is of interest to us.
No, thanks very much. And I mean, to look for parallels, I mean, when was there a similar transformation on this scale of market? It's you know, it's quite a new thing, right? I guess you go back to when petrol stations were first being set up and the first generation of big power stations. What's your analog to draw from?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, you know, there's similar things happening in the electricity market where actually no one envisaged large scale storage in the electricity market, and the rules just aren't set up to facilitate that. And so we're seeing that transition across, you know, the NEM started in, you know, 1998. And we really need to get out of the way of the new technology. We're not about picking winners, but we want those technologies, and hydrogen is one of them, that's got unique characteristics to be able to play a role in the transition, you know, to a zero carbon world by 2050. And I just think there are, you know, that social license just can't be lost. And that's something I think that's great that Sean's talking about, that we need to take people with us. It's kind of in that really everyone kind of loves hydrogen at the moment, but I caught the end of Phil's speech, and I think it's, you know, once the rubber hits the road of these big projects and what people have to deal with, you want to build that social license first, not when, you know, the scare stories start coming out.
So, yeah, I know there's a few hydrogen barbecues around Australia. I'm looking forward to seeing a few more. Have it part of everyday life. Yeah, and Dan, yeah, from your perspective, I guess you're able to kind of look at Australia from the outside a little bit, as well as your involvement here and your partners here. Do you want to share on some global learnings and how to set up those crucial early agreements that enable the project to get off the ground, and then yeah, what's been found to grow these markets successfully?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, it's fantastic. I mean, I haven't been in Australia for some time, as you can imagine. It's not been easy to sort of travel and see some of my friends and colleagues there. But you know, we watch what's happening in Australia with interest, and I must say, listening to you all, it's just fantastic to see the diversity of different projects and applications and scales and ideas, you know, being seen, and as well the different approaches being taken by all the different you know, political entities, states, federal government, and the different bodies within. And it's really fascinating for me to sort of sit here where I normally sort of focus on what's happening in Europe or Northeast Asia or the Middle East, and to hear what's happening back home. From my point of view, you know, having sort of got into this space on the sort of larger scale and mainly export and import sort of projects, you know, being where I am in the world, you know, some of the things that I've really noticed are the importance of financing to all of this. As you scale up, you know, it becomes more and more important to rely on debt as a way to support the financial underpinnings of a big project. And you know, what we spend a lot of time doing is structuring projects to be bankable. And that means coming back to some of the comments that were made earlier about having off-takers and how to make revenue for these projects bankable and treat it as something that lenders can rely on to get repaid in circumstances where things are moving. there is no market. I think, as was said earlier, there's never been a traded green hydrogen molecule anywhere. We're all spending a lot of time talking about it, but fundamentally, this is a thing that doesn't exist yet. And trying to get finance providers comfortable that, long-term loans can be made in an environment where pricing is unclear and regulation is unclear and applications are unclear is really challenging, and something that we spend an awful lot of time doing, but I think a critical piece to scaling up the industry. I think the other thing that we've really noticed as we go around the world doing, the larger projects is the importance of joint ventures. And, when you get into green hydrogen and you're talking about the sort of large scale integration of renewables and an industrial process, which has never really been done before in any kind of industrial process. You've never had a sort of direct connection between a renewables plant with intermittency and an industrial plant that requires 24/7 stable operations. That's an entirely new dynamic. And in certain parts of the world, if you want to sell product there, and Australia is going to confront this as well when it looks to export to Europe, direct connection is important. It's not always, it's a lot of international purchases don't call hydrogen green if it's been run through a grid and mixed up with a whole lot of other electrons. And so to meet these really strict definitions of what green hydrogen is, direct connection is an important part of that. And when you get into that, you start to discuss how to optimize the integration of renewables with industrial processes. And that involves a really interesting discussion between renewables developers who have a certain understanding of how to do projects and financing and all the rest of it, and oil and gas players, industrial gas players, the likes of some of the people speaking here who are used to molecules. And, you're then talking about, completely different languages of how to operate a project, how to develop a project. And so getting joint ventures between credible players in the renewables space and in the molecules space, who are then able to sort of, develop a project, implement it, finance it, and then market the product successfully domestically and around the world is also a really important part of what we do on the structuring side. And that's thrown up challenges that I don't think I've seen anywhere in my career doing traditional power projects, oil and gas projects, etc. Because, with those kinds of projects, even if you're talking about joint ventures, everybody's sort of coming from a similar starting point. When you talk to the gas players here, everybody believes in hydrogen, everybody believes in the story, and they're prepared to sort of put balance sheet risk on the line. But if you're a renewables developer, you don't have a big balance sheet. Your business is based on developing a project and bridge on it and then getting out, basically. So it's a completely different attitude to the way in which projects should be run. And yet, if these projects are going to be successful, it's really important that the renewables players stay in and help the industrial gases and molecules players optimize the projects over time, make sure that the renewables isn't just built and left there, but that it's properly integrated at an operational level on a day-to-day basis to ensure that maximal electrons are hitting that electrolyzer and ramping up the load factor. So all of these are really interesting dynamics that we've encountered as we've sort of gone around the world. And I think if we can, bring home some of those lessons about bankability and JV structuring and so on to Australia, we can really help move faster, because speed is of the absolute essence. And we've heard everybody here talk about the importance of moving fast and how committed we are and just trying to get this thing going. And I think, first mover advantage, when you sort of scale it up to nationwide, is really important. A lot of countries are moving really fast now in terms of setting up export industries, technology development, and electrolyzer manufacture, etc. We've seen some great announcements out of Gladstone and elsewhere about that. But if we can get Australia to move quickly, it really has a fantastic opportunity to capture early market share in Asia and Europe and elsewhere. And I certainly look forward to hopefully being able to help out with that.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Dan. A good message about pace. So, Stephen, if you were to summarise that in terms of your key takeaway and your key wish to enable projects to move forward and scale, from your perspective, what would you be emphasising?
A key for us as the world transitions to renewable energy. We see the long leads increasing. electrolyzers that used to be 12 to 14 months are now moving to 24 months. So I think as everyone plans transition, it's making sure your project stacks up financially. You understand the costs of hydrogen. We know the target in Australia is targeting $2 a kilogram, but again, it's understanding that what the $2 a kilogram means and how can you get there. It's I guess if you're at scale, large scale, and also out of the back of the electrolyzer, no compression and no transport, all of these things add up to get you to scale. And once you can get to scale, it's then it ties into your storage, and then how you're going to transport, whether it's ammonia, whether it's gaseous, compression, or liquid. It's understanding all of that parts of the supply chain, and once you get that understood, it's getting the market. And one thing that we've got, that's why we've got our early production system. We've got Aerosmith stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, and it's done deliberately because if you look at where we are with our strategic partners, to get Aerosmith at scale, that plant is not coming online till 2027. People need to realize that when you build a large-scale gigawatt projects, the amount of investment is required, and also the land mass that you need, and the time frame to make it happen. So you see a lot of people jumping on the where we're looking to participate in the hydrogen market now, and but there's no depth and substance behind them because they've got a lot to learn. And I think you're seeing a lot of new entries to the market now, and will they ever get off the ground? It goes back to what Dan's been talking about, projects. James and Sean all been talking about projects, infrastructure, heavy vehicles, export, the ammonias, the regassing. To do this properly, you need hundreds of millions of dollars, and if you're doing it at scale, you need several $billion. And I think that's a key fundamental gap that people haven't understood yet. It's the capital intent to do this.
Thanks very much, Steve. A good point you make about the learn-in and the run-in time. So I guess 5 years now we've been pretty heavily into hydrogen, and I know it's been that sort of journey for you too. So no, thanks very much. And Dan, I really like one of the points you made there about the integration on the working level of the intermittent nature of renewables with the steady gas production industrial processes. So we're working with a global super major at the moment, looking at some of their facilities where it's exactly that question in an international play, and taking the team through that, how to manage that integration. So no, I think that's a very good point. So a bit of a chance, Amy, from what you've seen and heard now, what do you think would be your summary for Australia capturing this industry where there really is a global race? We're not the only people looking at this space. What do you think is going to be the key for success for Australia now?
Good discussion, and agree with everything and has said today. I think, as Stephen said, when you talk about billions of dollars in investment for export scale, like strategic partners become essential to that. I think, and kind of listening to the sessions this morning, I think it is important to put a reality check on to where we are right now. So right now there's a handful of sub 2 megawatt projects that are in operation. And Arena's just funded 3 10 megawatt projects. And in terms of your comment on finance, Dan, that required $100 million of government grants. And none of those 10 megawatt projects are built. And so I think that it's a long ways to go to export. And I think it's just important that we kind of recognize the significance of state support, the significance of federal support, because concessional finance will be required to get to the next stage. We're not going to jump from a 2 megawatt project to a gigawatt project and make that commercial in the next few years or whatever we're kind of targeting here. And so I think that, from ATCO's perspective, very grateful for the support from the WA government and from the federal government, because quite simply, we wouldn't have that 10 megawatt project without that support.
Thanks, Amy. So Sean, your takeaways from this overall challenge, what would you like to highlight?
Yeah, I think the point I'd probably make is that if we wanted to be expediting the uptake of renewable gases such as hydrogen, I sort of look at what we're seeing from governments, and I think they're doing a really good job, federal and state, about providing seed funding, incentives to invest in hydrogen and biomethane development. But there is a policy game changer that I think could drive demand for green gas, and that's adopting a renewable gas target. 10% of renewable gas by 2030 could jumpstart the commercialisation of our zero emission gases and make them much more likely to be available to Australian homes and businesses. At a scale, it could mean across our network 9 petajoules by 2030. Nationally, the numbers were done, so it could be 2 million tonnes of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. And we think model perspective does become more sort of cost competitive. So I guess we sort of think about the renewable electricity target that applied over the last decade and how successful that was in the solar industry, and no reason really that a renewable gas target can't have that same sort of positive impact and provide the investment certainty that that many parties are looking for and help accelerate the growth of the industry. So I think there are more from a demand point of view to sort of support the supply and subsidies that are in place.
And James, from your perspective, what would you be looking forward to?
Oh, first off, great panel. I think it's drawn out that the missing person on the panel is the customer. So that's interesting. But I'm sure there's other sessions at this conference that will take the customer's perspective into account. But I think, and I couldn't agree more with Sean on the renewable gas target. There's a lot of focus on export, a lot of big bets being placed on major export from Australia, but as Amy has indicated, as Sean recognises, and others on the panel, we need more to do processes in Australia. A renewable gas target will help to achieve that. Right now, we use fossil fuel produced hydrogen in making chemicals. We can use green hydrogen in making chemicals and displace those fossil fuel based hydrogen molecules right now. And also in terms of the gas pipeline network, we've got it there, let's use it. There'll be hard to electrify processes and systems across Australia, and a green gas or a green hydrogen is part of the solution in terms of decarbonising those processes that are very difficult to electrify. So there's challenges ahead of us, plenty of opportunities though. And as I said before, I'd encourage us about applications in Australia as exporting this product overseas. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Amy and Luigi, I do want to try and give the opportunity for a question from the I listen in for Ben and Dan's takeaways. Perhaps you can look around to find.
Really quickly, I think, we're looking at how you get hydrogen gas into Australia. To do that, I think you go to the Finkel review, the strategy, and it talks about to get more than 10%, you've got to be able to prove up that low level of safety risk. You've got to be able to take communities with you, and you've got to be able to demonstrate and minimise the impact on gases. And I think that's the next of this, those three things which we talked about. And I really like Dan's point about the renewables and the intermittency and how those two things couple together. I thought that was a great point.
Very good.
Hey, David, so I'll ask that question put the question to the floor, yeah?
Hang on just a minute, mate. I'm just going to get a bit of one more takeaway from Dan there, and then we'll let it over. Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, no worries. Just want to make a couple of points. The first being on the sort of importance of the domestic demand and the domestic, maxing out effectively domestic use of green hydrogen before exports, and then secondly on the quotas and what the government can do to incentivise through quotas and policies of that kind. On the domestic demand, I think if you look at policies worldwide, it's clear that nobody thinks that creating hydrogen with green power makes sense before you fully electrified your grid. So fully electrify the grid, electrify everything you can, then use excess renewables to create hydrogen. That's the most efficient way in which to decarbonize, and I think that's important. But then when you take it to the next step, okay, what do you do with that hydrogen? It makes absolute sense, again, to decarbonize everything domestically before you export. And I think, the rest of the world looks at Australia with massive envy when it comes to green hydrogen, because green hydrogen fundamentally is a natural resource that only some countries have. It's a combination of sun, wind, and land. And most countries in the world do not have those things. And they do not have the ability to build out renewables to get to decarbonisation of their grid, much less get to domestic hydrogen, much less get to export. And Australia has that. And so the rest of the world, looks at Australia and says, this is where we want to be. That's why you're seeing all the investment come in and people looking to export, because they want to stake out that territory to get hold of that land so that that natural resource, is under control and can be sent. And that's what's going on worldwide. So, think about it. When you start to think about hydrogen as a natural resource, I think it becomes very clear why people are so focused on the speed of exploiting that natural resource before others do, essentially. So I think that's point one. Point two, on quotas. So Europe has quotas for green hydrogen. In Europe, there's a requirement that by 2030, hydrogen used in transport has to be 50% green. And most importantly, hydrogen used in industry. All hydrogen used in industry must be 50% green, and a very specific kind of green. It's that green I mentioned earlier, where it's basically through a direct connection of renewables to an electrolyzer. And that is incentivizing massive focus in Europe on hydrogen, along with the carbon tax that people have to pay if they don't. So it's the combination of the governments, the EU, saying there's a quota on use of hydrogen in these sectors. If you don't do it, there's consequences at the state level, but there's also the carbon tax. And by the way, here's some incentives around things like carbon contracts for difference and other carrots, if you will, to get things going. And that combination of policy tools is really driving things in Europe, and that's what's creating as well exports to Europe.
No, thanks very much, Dan. And I guess from my perspective, we see domestic projects, we see export projects, and we work with international projects. And for me, it really comes away with a message of hope. We're being able to see we can do all this safely. We're seeing with the correct ecosystem where you consider the co-products you might have, whether it's power or oxygen or carbon dioxide or steel that's surplus from the method you use to generate the hydrogen. We're finding that when the correct ecosystem can be created, there are very highly economic opportunities in many of these spaces, but they do require innovation in business models. They do require innovation in the way that that the contracts are created, and it does require, a certain flexible, entrepreneurial, innovative type of partnership as well to make those happen. Yeah, I really came away with a message that this is such a generational opportunity for Australia. I saw the LNG industry grow around me, and I really feel this is our next chance, and we kind of owe it to the next generation not to miss it. Luigi, you have a question from the floor there. We're really interested to hear what you have and task the panel with addressing it. What have you got, man?
Not just yet, David, so I'll put it to you. If anyone has a question you'd like to direct to any of the panel members, then please indicate with an arm, a hand. You wouldn't believe it, David.
They're all signed up.
No questions. You've done a magnificent effort.
No questions from the floor.
Any second takers? No. Oh, yes, hang on.
Yeah.
Movement at the station.
Come up in the front so we can see you. That'd be great.
There's a gentleman approaching the microphone in a few seconds, David.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And could you just identify yourself, your organisation, please?
Well, good. Rob Dickinson, Hydrocity Systems. I just wanted to highlight the importance when we're talking about trade. Are we talking about within Australia or between countries? Because Canada's been trading green hydrogen for years for example, or more than that, if you go back far enough. With the 2010 Winter Olympics, they sold Quebec hydro power to hydrogen to BC Transit. So, yeah, I presume you were just talking about exports. Is that right?
No, I think both. I think it's both. I think the establishment of a green gas trading.
So if we're talking about both, then we need to be clear which one we're talking about.
Right. Okay. It's all but mushed together. So, I mean, I think the renewable gas target would be focused on the domestic network, domestic opportunity. And then, of course, export is not in the near term. But I think the point was that if a green gas trading platform is developed for hydrogen, that will create a demand sink that should facilitate the export market. So is that about right?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And also a bit of perspective on that one. Yeah, it were great achievements in Canada, and we saw recently some more detail of that 2010 Olympics facility. And I guess Canada's a good example where they've been able to develop their own technological capability in the hydrogen space and exporting to the world. And I think that's certainly an opportunity for Australia as well to develop that type of technological capability and export capability and engineering know-how, and hopefully in products too. Would others on the panel like to address the opportunity in green hydrogen trading, where that might open up?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan?
Yeah. No, look, so green hydrogen is going to become very much, I think, David, like LNG. Ultimately, it's certainly being viewed that way by the international oil and gas players. Obviously, sitting here in the Middle East, we work with the likes of ADNOC, and we look at Aramco and these other big traditional hydrocarbon players, a number of whom, Aramco, for instance, dropped its LNG program in favor of an ammonia program. If you look at Uniper, a massive trader of LNG and other molecules around the world, they have refurbished or are refurbishing terminals to import LNG into Europe into ammonia terminals. And then, of course, there's an entirely new sort of trading and marketing set up by the likes of, Trafigura and Vitol, these big traders. Singapore is looking at becoming the trading hub of hydrogen for Asia. So you're going to see emerge, I think, a very similar set. And this is why oil and gas players love hydrogen, right? Because it's exactly what they already know. You put stuff on ships, you send it here, you send it there, and I think you're going to see a very similar supply chain with the trading element involved emerging for this all around the world. And that's what people want to achieve. That's what ultimately the oil and gas executives sort of picture when they picture a hydrogen economy.
Thanks. And there was a challenge put to us about the voice of the customer in this, and I can share on that front. We're with our clients responding to international requests for tens of billions of dollars of green ammonia. So although it's sort of not explicitly represented, we're part of that story. And yeah, I think this is the industry waiting to be created. It's in our hands right now, and no, I think that's a good challenge for all of us. And maybe that's a good note on which to close, unless any of the other panelists wanted to add on that point. So, okay, well, that brings us a bit closer to time. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this Leader Associates International Conference. And yeah, I'll be listening with interest online, and please do take the opportunity to say hello to Luigi and others who are there at the conference. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, panelists, for your contributions in the preparation and delivery today. I really enjoyed that dialogue and look forward to continuing the relationship. Okay, so I guess we'll leave it there and hand over back to the room. A round of applause for the panelists, please.
Thanks, David. Bye all.
Thank you very much, everyone on the panel and the moderator. I am the last remaining hurdle between yourself and lunch, so please go for it. I think we're going to reconvene at 2 p.m. I think that's the plan. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you.